Frontline investigates every corner of the world so you can discover the stories that others can't or won't tell whenever you want. Watch Frontline on the PBS app anytime on your TV or smart device.
I'm senior digital producer Megan Smith, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Brady, head on Boston Public Radio. After Biden's disastrous debate performance, Congressman Seth Moulton was one of the first Democrats calling for Biden to step down. He'll join us at the top of the show to explain his position, if it's changed at all after Biden's NATO press conference last night, and what his colleagues are really thinking.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Many say last night's press conference was Biden's last chance to prove he's capable. There were some gaffes, but he improved dramatically over the debate debacle, and his grasp of foreign affairs was far better than convicted felon Donald.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Biden heads to Michigan today to shore up support in the swing state. He reiterated last night during an hour-long press conference that he is staying in the presidential contest. Michigan Public Radio Network's Rick Pluta has more.
Biden has been facing calls to step aside ahead of the Democratic National Convention next month. That's after a weak performance in his first debate against Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee. Teresa Reed is a Michigan convention delegate committed to Biden. She says Democrats are split on whether Biden should exit the race, but are looking for reassurance one way or the other.
Everybody is terrified of the prospect of a Trump win. And that's, I think, why you're seeing so much anxiety.
Michigan is a swing state that went for Trump over Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton in 2016 and for Biden by a slim margin in 2020. For NPR News, I'm Rick Pluta in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Meanwhile, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries has released a letter to his Democratic colleagues. He says he held a private meeting yesterday with President Biden, and he says he conveyed to the president candid views that the Democratic caucus has shared in discussions about the future of the country. About 20 Democratic lawmakers have urged Biden to quit the race. Jeffries has supported the president. Republicans say they're optimistic former President Donald Trump can win Wisconsin in November. From member station WUWM, Mayan Silva reports the GOP convention kicks off next week in Milwaukee.
10 counties account for about 50% of the vote in Wisconsin. Deep Blue Milwaukee is one of them. Hilario De Leon, chair of the Milwaukee County GOP, says for a long time, Republicans left it alone.
Now they're starting to wake up and realize that if you lose by less in cities like Milwaukee, you can take the rest of the state because the rest of the state will carry for President Trump.
De Leon is also counting on Republicans like Cheryl Rebholz in GOP tilting suburbs around Milwaukee to do their part.
What I volunteered to do is set up voter registrations at my gun range.
Republicans are gearing up to host their national convention in Milwaukee starting Monday. For NPR News, I'm Mayan Silver in Milwaukee.
The United Nations says the world's population will increase to more than 10 billion people by the 2080s. John Wilmoth is with the UN. He says this will affect the world's climate.
The population does continue to grow, so the impact that humans have on the environment and the world continues to increase just as a function of how many of us there are. But at the same time, one thing that we try to emphasize in this report is that human behaviors matter more than human numbers when it comes to the impact on the environment.
By the 2070s, the UN predicts there will be more senior citizens on the planet than there will be children. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrials are up 260 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The National Weather Service says almost all of Massachusetts is under a flood watch through tomorrow night, Saturday night. Forecasters say a storm system moving in from the Great Lakes has the potential to drop several inches of rain in a very short period of time. The forecast calls for heavy rain arriving just before sunrise tomorrow. As for how much rain is possible, they say it could be about 2 inches per hour in isolated areas and up to 4 inches over 3 hours. Meanwhile, police have confirmed a second fatality related to the flash flooding that hit northern Vermont and New Hampshire this week. As Vermont Public Radio's Leah Melder-Connors reports, 73-year-old John Rice died yesterday after attempting to drive through floodwater in Linden, Vermont.
Witnesses reportedly tried to stop Rice from driving through the water on Center Street. But Lyndonville Police Chief Jack Harris says Rice drove ahead and the current swept away the car, sending it about 250 feet into a hayfield.
And when I got there, I could see the back portion of the roof and the back windows of the vehicle. The rest of the vehicle was submerged.
Swift water rescue teams recovered Rice's body around 5:30 p.m. Thursday. A 33-year-old man from Peacham also died during the floods. Police say Dylan Kempton was driving his UTV on Wednesday evening when a culvert breached, sending water rushing over the road and sweeping away the UTV. For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Leah Melder-Connors.
And cleanup continues in Vermont today. 84 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Cigna Healthcare, a health benefits provider that advocates for better health through every stage of life. Learn more at Cigna.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be back at the library on Tuesday. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Now we are joined on the phone by United States Representative Seth Moulton, one of the first congressional Democrats to call for President Biden to step down. We reached out to Senators Markey and Warren, Representatives Clark, Presley, Lynch, and Moulton to discuss the situation with the president. Only Congressman Moulton responded and agreed to join us. Congressman Moulton, thanks so much for your time.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Congressman, for joining us. As Jim said before, you are one of the only Democrats who's publicly said that Joe Biden needs to step aside in this race. He gave a long press conference last night. Did that change your mind or no?
No, it didn't. I'm sorry. And by the way, the background noise is because I'm on the T on the way to the VA here for a doctor's appointment, so bear with me.
Oh, good luck, Congressman.
No, thank you. It's all good. It's all good. But look, as the Boston Globe said this morning, last night wasn't a disaster. That can't be the bar. You know, the president is not ahead in this race where he just needs to hold his own. He needs to claw his way back. He was behind in the polls going into the debate, and of course, he's dropped a lot since then. So he needs to show how he can turn this around, not how he can just hold his own, not how he can get to a press conference without a disaster, but how he can start really winning his way back, turning around this campaign, showing a pathway to win, because right now we're sadly on a pathway to losing, and the stakes are too high in this election to allow Donald Trump a second term.
You know, what are your colleagues saying to you and others behind the scenes? I think there's somewhere short of 20 Democrats in the House of Representatives who are like you, said that President Biden they have great respect for. They honor his service and the incredible things he's done in the past 3.5 years. What are those who have not joined your ranks been saying behind the scenes?
I mean, I quickly lost count of how many people were coming up to me after my remarks at caucus and just said, thank you for what you said, or well said, or, good job, man. The reality is that the majority of Democrats in this country, but I think also in the Democratic caucus in the House, and I bet in the Senate too, are very concerned about the president and think he should step aside so that we can win this race.
So why don't they say it? Why don't they say it?
Well, I don't know. They're making political calculations, And I just decided it's time to be honest about this. It's time to be honest with the American people, with the constituents I represent in Massachusetts, and frankly, be honest with the president. I spent days making calls in private, behind the scenes, trying to do this as respectfully as I could, speaking with folks on the inner circle. But it became quickly apparent that the president wasn't listening. And I think as a representative, I owe people my honest views.
Well, wait. No, don't leave that topic. You say inner circle, meaning the president's inner circle, Congressman?
That's right. That's
and
right.
what,
So
what
reaching
were
out to
they
people
saying?
in the White House and
What were
whatnot.
they saying to you?
Mostly no response. I mean, didn't even want to engage in a discussion. I mean, that's how obstinate they were.
Congressman, I'm not blaming you because you did publicly say early on that you thought the president needed to step aside, but it's infuriating I spent a lot of time criticizing Republicans who are secretly talking about how they think Donald Trump is deranged and unhinged, but they won't say so publicly because it seems to me they're putting their political future and political calculations for the country. The Democrats are doing the same thing right now. If they think that Joe Biden cannot win this race, and we talk about Trump as a real threat to all sorts of things, including democracy, climate change, women's rights, all these kinds of things, and they're shutting up, they're doing the same thing Republicans do, aren't they?
Well, honestly, they are.
Yeah.
And you're right, because Republicans have been doing this for years, and they continue to do it now. You know, when I talk to Republicans in the House and in private, they often decry President Trump. They know he's a terrible man. They know he abuses the Constitution. They know he's terrible for our national security. He'll give Ukraine to Putin. He'll allow Xi Jinping to invade Taiwan and potentially start World War III in the Pacific. He'll tear up rights at home. Doesn't care at all about rights for women. I mean, this is a guy who's such a hypocrite. He used to be a Democrat, and now he's just trying to be the most conservative Republican the party has ever seen. Trump is terrible. And Republicans aren't all idiots. They know this too, but they refuse to say anything. I'm not going to be like that. I think we've got to be honest about the situation, even when it's painful. And this is painful. I mean, I'll tell you, this is painful for me personally because of what an amazing mentor President Biden has been to me. Really a mentor and a friend. He was the first to come up and campaign for me after my contentious primary in my first race. You know, days after elected politicians from Massachusetts were knocking doors for my opponent, Vice President Biden showed up and held a big rally for me in Lynn. And then after I got elected, he used to have me over for breakfast at the Vice President's residence and mentor me on being a new member of Congress. He's someone I've always been excited to see. He used to call me when I had a good interview that he heard and say, you know, good job. And so this is someone that I not only respect, but someone I genuinely love. He's been an amazing man, not just an amazing president who's accomplished so much. But there's a time and place for everything. And this is bigger than one man, bigger than one president. This is not about President Biden. This is about winning this important race. We've got to win.
Congressman, did President Biden and then the Vice President have any response to your call for Nancy Pelosi to give up the speakership back when you were pursuing that effort? Was he approving of that? I suspect not, or maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I don't remember exactly what he said about that, although I do remember what his boss said. And, well, it was a private conversation, and I won't quote it. It didn't discourage me.
So, Congressman, are you worried that if you fail at this effort, and I say you, collectively, the handful and a half of Democrats who are calling for Biden to step down, that if you fail, if he stays the course, that you've done irreparable damage to his campaign? Because I assume if he does stay in, that you're going to be in an ad. You and your colleagues are going to be in ads saying this guy should not be our nominee. Ads by the Trump people or PACs supporting Trump.
Sure. Well, maybe that's one of the excuses some of my colleagues are using to not do something. But when you're on a path to failure, when your strategy is not working, you can't just double down on your strategy. You need to make a change. You need to make a change even if there's some risk in that change. There are other risks too, of course. You know, people are pointing to the fact that we don't know what the process will be like if the president were to step aside. Will he just hand it over to Vice President Harris, who I think has often been underestimated? Or will there be some sort of mini primary like James Carville and Jim Clyburn and others have called for? Look, those are all risks, but we know this course is headed towards failure. There's very little evidence to the contrary. He's behind in the polls now. He's worse after the debate. He was behind before the debate. He's worse now. And he hasn't shown us any way to turn things around. There's been nothing from the president or the campaign about how he's going to do things differently to claw back what he's lost, to make sure that he can win, and to make sure that Democrats up and down the ticket win in this critical election in November.
I assume you'd agree that there's risk. Each approach is risk-laden. There is a poll, you probably haven't seen it this morning, a Marist poll that's out nationally, and I know national polls don't mean as much as the individual states, where President Biden is up 2 points. A poll yesterday where he was tied, and with the exception of Michelle Obama, there's no Democrat head-to-head who beats Donald Trump. So does the risk of a post-Biden Democratic candidate not worry you?
Of course there's some risk there. But we know from what we can see today that the current path is not working. And all the things that people are concerned about, Biden's energy, his vigor, his how coherent he is in press conferences and whatnot, fundamentally his age, right? That's what fundamentally we're talking about. We don't like to say the word, but fundamentally we're talking about his age. And I can't predict exactly what's going to happen in November or between now and then. I can't predict exactly how all these other candidates will do. But one thing I can tell you is Joe Biden's going to be older. This isn't going to get better.
You know, Congressman, Jeannie Sue Gerson is a professor at Harvard Law School. She's going to join us on Monday. She's written a piece in The New Yorker where she argues that the same amendment that most of us never heard of during Donald Trump, that some said should have been used to remove him from office, should be used to remove Joe Biden. She writes the 25th Amendment was designed for a situation in which the president may not recognize his own impairment. Is that an option that you would embrace?
I've never argued that Joe Biden is incompetent to be president today. What I've argued is that he's not going to win an election for another 4 years. This is not about the present or the past, which is what he always brings up. He always talks about how he deserves to be president again because of all the things that he's done so far, which are amazing, by the way. He has been a remarkably accomplished president and a remarkably accomplished senator before that. But this is about people making a judgment for what he can do in the next 4 years, whether he can serve for 4 years. That's what's at stake here, and that's where I'm focused.
So, Congressman, we're speaking with Congressman Seth Moulton, one of the first Democrats to come out and say that the president needs to step aside in this race. Congressman, you mentioned Kamala Harris. Of course, she's the vice president as a potential candidate. You've also talked about a deep bench among other Democrats. Like who?
Well, I mean, there are Democratic governors across the country that people are talking about, people like Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. There, of course, were 25 people, some that people don't even remember, like myself, but others who ran for president back in 2020. There's really remarkable talent across our party. I've been focused on trying to get national service veterans elected to Congress in the last 5 or 6 years. And people who really understand what it means to serve your country, even put your life on the line for our country. I mean, these are remarkable leaders who are serving in Congress, or some of them running for the Senate today. There is a deep bench of principled talent with remarkable records of service to our country all across the country in the Democratic Party. But we don't hear about it. We don't hear about it because so often the leadership at the top has become calcified.
You know, we only have a couple of minutes left. We know you've got to get to a doctor. You're on the T, which is remarkable. By the way, if you're a member of the state legislature, you could get a car paid for with your campaign finance account. You wouldn't have to take the train there. So 2 quick things. Speaking of service, and I assume people know that Congressman Moulton did 4 tours of duty in Iraq. Marjorie and I are both advocates for mandatory service for people when they get out of high school in this country. Not necessarily, doesn't have to be military, it could be civil. Do you support such a notion?
Basically, yes, although I don't know that it has to be mandatory. I would like it to be an expectation where, when you go into a job interview when you're 30, one of the first questions you can get expected to ask or be asked is just, where did you serve? Did you serve in the Marine Corps or in the Peace Corps? Did you do some national service? Maybe you worked at one of these VA hospitals helping veterans when they get back. I don't know if it helps to make it mandatory, but I'll tell you what, the last time I checked, there were 5 AmeriCorps volunteers for every 1 AmeriCorps slot. So even if you just made these programs dramatically bigger, you do pretty well to serve them. And then I think there'd be a lot of peer pressure, or other people would say, hey, what are you going to do?
Last thing, there's a piece in the Atlantic that is essentially about your perspective that regardless of who ends up being the Democratic standard bearer, that the Democrats are losing the middle class, that they're basically focused on the uber rich and low and moderate income people. Could you
And they cater too much to the left.
Yeah, could you absolutely? Could you quickly make your case, Congressman?
Well, here's the basic case. The Republican Party is in the midst of a civil war playing out across the country, although it came to a head in the House of Representatives where we didn't even have a speaker for the first time in American history last fall. The party is led by a convicted criminal, someone who's a terrible person and everyone knows is a hypocrite. And yet Democrats are not winning. I mean, this should be the easiest election for us ever. We should be cleaning up from school board to President of the United States. And we're not. So what does that say about us? How have we lost touch with so many people in America? I don't know what the exact answer to that question is, but that's a question that Democrats have to be asking ourselves. We've got to look ourselves in the mirror and say, where have we gone wrong?
Congressman, we really appreciate your time. As always, hope to speak to you again soon. Be well, and good luck at the doctor.
Thank you, and we hope you have an uneventful ride on the MBTA.
Congressman Seth Moulton.
It's been good so far. Thanks very much.
That's
Our
good.
pleasure.
We've been speaking with Congressman Seth Moulton, one of the few Democrats to publicly call for President Biden to step aside and leave his campaign to someone else. Next, we're going to open the lines to continue this conversation. After the performance last night, the press conference last night, we'll get your thoughts on the president's press conference and whether he should keep going or whether he should indeed step aside. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live at the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
When a city is picked to host the Olympic Games, there's usually a promise about new building projects and lots of jobs to support the local economy. But things don't often work out that way.
You can make other choices about bringing economic opportunity. You don't have to host the Olympics to do that.
Broken Olympic promises, that's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Boston Children's Museum. From Winnie the Pooh to the outdoor Curiosity Kitchen, you can make this summer special with a visit to Boston Children's Museum. Learn more at bostonchildrensmuseum.org. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Andrew Lloyd Webber, Liz Cheney, historian Annette Gordon-Reed, and news anchor Chris Wallace. bostonspeakers.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan, broadcasting live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. By the way, if you go to youtube.com/GBH News, what do they also find, Marjorie?
Oh, they find the little pictures of Daisy, the little baby goat that was in our studio yesterday. The best part of it was Daisy walking in the hallway, bold as brass, like this is, I go to news stations all the time and get interviewed by news reporters. But this is, what was a 3-week-old little baby goat?
3-week-old, yeah.
Yeah, adorable. And
by the way,
cuddled on you were holding the baby like a little newborn.
Right, the whole segment is there on video, plus, as Marjorie said, some beautiful excerpts of the little goat walking into the studio.
Yeah.
In any case, check that out, youtube.com/GBH News. Last night, I assume virtually all of you watched this, I hope you did. President tried to allay Democratic concerns, and I guess beyond the Democrats, but primarily them, that he's not fit for another 4 years as president. In this unscripted solo press conference, President took questions from reporters for about an hour, facing a ton of them about whether other Democrats would be better suited to beat Trump, and if he should drop out of the race.
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win. Me. No one's saying that. No poll says that.
Actually, Seth Moulton and others are saying that, but obviously the campaign would like people like Congressman Moulton to stop saying what they're doing, arguing that he's hurting the effort. Do you agree with that? Where are you on this? Do you think after last night that it's time for the president to step aside for another Democrat, that it'll allay your fears? Where are you after this press conference, this much-awaited press conference, which many people in the media were suggesting may be the most important one of Joe Biden's career? The number is 877-301-8890. As we heard on the news, the Democratic leader of the House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries, met with the president last night. It's not clear if he urged him to step aside, but to represent to him the array of positions of members of the House. And if you listen to Seth Moulton, that includes a ton of members who are not publicly saying, but believing that Biden's got to go.
I'll say again what I said to the congressman, I'm really disgusted with the Democrats. If they think that Joe Biden is going to lose not only the presidency, but lose for the country, the House and the Senate, and then we'd have Trump and a Republican House and Senate, which would be extremely problematic in my view with their wacky ideas they've got. We're just talking about massive flooding here. I mean, Trump is a climate change denier. He'll move back everything we've moved forward, or try to do that anyway, which would be a disaster for the whole world, never mind us. But these Democrats, if they're so worried about it, they should have the you-know-whats to say so publicly and put more pressure on him, or they should end this and move on. We can't keep doing this for the next week and a half or 2 weeks, because we are running out of time here.
So if you didn't watch last night, it's after the prepared statement about the NATO meetings, which I think was about 8 minutes, the first thing we heard the president say, unscripted, was confusing Kamala Harris with Donald Trump. This is again the first unscripted comments out of his mouth. Here's what the president had to say.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there.
Now, on the other hand, I think at least you and I agree, Marjorie, that on most foreign policy issues, while he was slow and halting at time in his speech, he showed his command of the issues as somebody who's been involved in foreign policy issues and the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Here's a little bit of him talking about calling out his support of NATO versus Donald Trump's.
NATO's not only stronger, NATO is bigger, because we led the charge to bring in Finland and Sweden into the alliance, and it makes a gigantic difference. Excuse me. Meanwhile, my predecessor has made it clear he has no commitment to NATO. He's made it clear that he would feel no obligation to honor Article 5. He's already told Putin, and I quote, "Do whatever the hell you want."
By the way, I should have made clear that was part of the portion which he read from a teleprompter during his initial comments.
He was really good off the cuff talking about foreign affairs. That's one of his areas of expertise. He was talking about China. I think he has a much more comprehensive knowledge of foreign affairs than certainly Donald Trump does, who likes to hang around with dictators.
So does Daisy the goat have a better understanding of foreign affairs.
But the thing is, Americans don't really usually vote on NATO and foreign affairs. They vote on more kitchen table issues. The cost of living, the abortion issue, which is a kitchen table issue.
Inflation's down yesterday.
Yeah, that may help him dramatically, and interest rates may follow. But we don't know that right now. But I think one of the things the Democrats do say is he's not bringing in the message. The message he doesn't, and he didn't do it in the debate. He didn't do it yesterday. You could have swung to more of those matters that really are what people vote on.
You think he should step aside? No Democrat, as I said to Seth.
I don't know if he should step aside.
Okay, for those who do, let me put it that way. My apologies.
Because I think, as Moulton says, both sides are very risky.
No Democrat other than Michelle Obama, as I've mentioned, that Congressman Moulton does better against Trump than President Biden does. So what do you say to that?
Well, we're in a mess if you don't want Trump to win. But I'm moved by people who say, we know we're losing now, and despite what President Biden says, we do know we're losing now. He's doing worse. That's Biden in the swing states, and the swing states decide elections. Places like New Hampshire that haven't put a Republican in the presidential office since 2000. Now people are talking about the possibility of New Hampshire voting for Trump. So it looks very, very bad. So part of me thinks, and I don't have the answer, but part of me thinks doing nothing in the face of a pending disaster, and Biden is going to keep he's going to keep aging, and we're going to keep watching him for mistakes as he goes on between now and November.
In every single public thing he does.
So it might make sense to get someone who is able to articulate the message, because the Democrats are with the American people on almost every single issue.
You know, by the way, before we get to your calls, which we'll do in about 15 seconds at 877-301-8970, talking about what a hackorama the Republican Party is.
Yep.
I was just watching on CNN behind you. You know who's introducing Trump's vice presidential nominee at the convention? Trump Jr. I mean, Trump Jr., Trump's daughter-in-law runs the RNC. I mean, it is incredible. And as Seth Moulton said, the one thing that is hard to dispute, if you step back for a minute and describe the resumes of these two candidates, honestly, including the age, the notion the Democrat is not beating a felon, a rapist, a fraudster, a whatever, by 20 points is just unbelievable.
And the other thing, that Trump is distancing himself from Project 2025, even though he's lying, of course, about that too, because he says he doesn't know anybody that's involved with it, even though 140 people that are involved with it used to work for him. I think he should, maybe the Democrats should emphasize 2025, the project. They want to criminalize pornography, Jim.
I know,
millions
that's a big
and
one.
Millions and millions of
It's
Americans
interesting.
spend
You've
an awful
mentioned that
lot of
about
time.
10 times in 2 days. I guess
as
that
we
matters
all
to
know,
you.
when you know that the money spent on and the time spent on pornography dwarfs what we do with football, basketball, baseball, all those sports, gambling, everything
Combined.
else. So, you know, a lot of people could be going to jail under the Trump presidency.
Let's go to Tim and Gardner. You're first on Boston Public Radio. Hey, Tim.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for taking my call.
Our pleasure.
So I'm hoping Congressman Moulton is still listening, because I have always voted for him in the past, but he has completely lost my vote forever over all of this, as has every other Democrat who's on this train.
Why is that?
This is a conversation that we should have been having a year ago or 2 years ago.
We should have.
Let me say first that I am just furious that we're stuck with Joe Biden and Donald Trump as our two choices again. I hated that 4 years ago. I can't believe that that's where we are again now. However, Congressman Moulton is not helping the situation by doing this. If he sees him flagging in the polls and he thinks he's having trouble, the response should have been to go campaign for him, to help out in some way, not start spreading all the stuff through the media that even the Democrats don't think he's capable. Or that's how we're definitely going to end up with Trump. As you've both pointed out, there's nobody else to replace him with. And it's too late. We've had the primaries.
I haven't said, if I may, Tim, I haven't said there's nobody to replace him with. And I would argue, even though I respect your position and I probably agree with it, the tipping point was the debate, which was 2 weeks and 1 day ago. There's no question that people knew that Joe Biden had slowed down, but nothing came close to what 50 million Americans saw 2 weeks ago Thursday. So doesn't that change the equation just a little bit, or no?
You know, I'll give you a little bit on that, but also no. I think that the response to that, like I said, should have been shoring up his campaign, helping out in any way that she can, especially someone like Seth Moulton, who sat here and talked out of both sides of his mouth, talking about how Biden is his friend and his mentor out of one side. Well, on the other side, he's saying he's not fit to be the president and he needs to get out of the way. And again, I agree. But it's too late. This is something we should have talked about 2 years ago and found another nominee.
Well, you know, Tim,
bring this kind of chaos into the system now, and you're just guaranteeing a Donald Trump win.
Just one thing on that, on knowing this a long time ago. We did. I mean, Biden announced in April of 2023 that he was going to run again, right? And polls have been showing, and everybody says, oh, polls aren't accurate. Well, lots of times the polls are very accurate. Showed that Democrats, people that would vote for him, have been very unhappy since the beginning. Joe Biden described himself as a transitional
They asked him that
president.
question last night.
They did ask him that. I was very glad they asked. That's what he said, and that's what I thought. He was going to be a bridge to the next generation. And I, again, blame the people who knew about this and his staff and his family. He hasn't had a press conference for 8 months until yesterday. He wasn't in front of us. So that's why I think there was such a shock at that debate. And they still haven't explained. It wasn't about a cold. It wasn't about his being tired from traveling. He still hasn't explained what happened to him that night. And I think that's a very disingenuous position to be in for him.
By the way, and Tim, thanks for the call. A place where I disagree with Tim, I don't think Seth Moulton, whether you agree with him or not, is speaking out both sides of his mouth. You can believe that he was a mentor to you, that he's been a great president, but be convinced that he can't serve competently for 4.5 more years.
I think what Moulton said is he thinks he's going to lose, big time. And there are people who think he's going to lose in a landslide.
Well, you know, for whatever it's worth, and I worry about that a lot too, because I consider Donald Trump the danger that all of these people, you, Moulton, etc., are suggesting. These polls show post-debate, again, they're national, but I assumed there was going to be a precipitous drop in support for Joe Biden. Last couple of days, he's been in a dead heat, and this morning, as I said, the Marist poll, he's up 2 points. It's not huge, and it's not the swing states, but clearly there is not this disappearance of support for Joe Biden, which I thought there would be. Tim, thanks for the call. 877-301-8090. We're asking people if their opinion of Biden's candidacy changed in any way based upon his hour-long press conference last night. Rick in Cambridge, hey.
Hello.
Hello.
So we need a candidate, not who's just going to claw their way back. We need a candidate who is going to go full throttle. We need somebody that's like going to, as they've been saying, prosecute the case against Donald Trump with a lot of energy, a lot of vigor, and who is going to present the case for everything Democrats have done
Who's that?
During the last 4 years.
Who is it?
And Kamala Harris, I would put at the top of the ticket.
Mm-hmm.
I would get somebody as vice president who had, like Elizabeth Warren. I'm not saying Elizabeth Warren, even though I think she'd be a great president, but somebody like her and Kamala Harris that can really be, I'm sorry to say this, but attack dogs. The Democrats and Biden have been bullied. They've been punched to the ground. They stay on the ground. They allow themselves to be kicked, and they just take it. We have to go after the cheating, the lies, the fraud, that what Trump's going to do, and it has to be taken to the people daily, repeatedly, and it has to be done by the candidate and the vice presidential candidate.
Rick, thank you for your perspective. We really appreciate it.
Well, we haven't yet elected one woman. I think the idea of having two women on the same ticket, I hope he didn't mean that, because I think that would be a disaster. I hate to say it, but there's a lot of misogyny in the United States of America. I mean, that's Kamala Harris has got that going against her. She's also got racism going against her. So,
well, you and I mean, there's a lot of racism in this country, but as I say, I don't think that's an insurmountable obstacle at all.
Well, a lot of
against
people,
Donald Trump in particular.
Well, she's a great prosecutor, and I think people have underestimated her, as Seth Moulton and many other people have said. And Biden didn't do any favors by sending her off to try to solve immigration, which has been a nonstop problem for like years and years. She's been hugely effective going around the country talking about reproductive rights.
Mm-hmm.
She's been really good about that. And as we've said before, when you saw her in the Senate going after people like Bill Barr, the Attorney General under Donald Trump, she was fantastic. I mean, she could burrow right in there like a terrific lawyer. So she is, I think, more effective than people give her credit for. Some people are talking about her and the guy nobody's ever heard of, but he's from Kentucky, and he's a Democrat, Andy Beshear, this young man, kind of the middle of the road.
Some people like you and Chuck Todd, essentially.
Yeah, I think I've talked about him before. Chuck mentioned it yesterday.
You did indeed.
Jim.
Well, by the way, I mean, there are a lot of people who think that if she's the nominee, it should be a governor of one of the states that's at risk of going to Donald Trump, like Josh Shapiro, who's a brand new governor from Pennsylvania. But there are a lot of talented 40 and 50 somethings in the Democratic Party, most of whom don't have a high profile outside their states, but there are a lot of them.
I just want to say there's a lot of Texans who are very, very angry that we're talking about this constantly. The media is talking about this constantly, the idea that this is just going to make Biden weaker and weaker and weaker. And you know something else? I think it's going to be interesting to see for people that do feel that the press is what brought Biden down. If he does step aside, there'll be so much resentment toward the press and the pushing aside of Biden that people won't vote for whoever.
Wait a second. If a majority of Democrats want Biden to step down, why is there going to be any resentment against the media?
I don't know. I go back to the Deborah Norville taking over for Jane Pauley on the Today Show, Jim. People may remember Jane Pauley was the beloved host of the Today Show for many years. She got shoved aside for this young whippersnapper, Deborah Norville, and the ratings for the Today Show plummeted.
Perfect parallel.
Well, resentment is a very powerful force.
Well, except that people don't want Joe Biden. The American people in polls show that they don't want Joe Biden to run.
But there are some Democrats who do want Joe Biden to run, and those are the people that I think might be driven aside.
Can I respond to that text?
You wouldn't know anything about resentment.
I don't understand resentment because I never feel it. I want to respond to that texter. I hope this doesn't come off as defensive.
Yeah.
We said we're talking too much about this. We have talked about the flaws and criminality of Donald Trump, I would say probably every day on the show for 10 years?
Yes.
8 years? This is newsworthy, what is going on. You cannot watch that press conference and be a responsible person and say, well, because Donald Trump is a threat, we should not talk about the fact that Joe Biden may not be up to the job to be president until he's 86 years old.
And we haven't talked about the donor factor. That was one of the things about the George Clooney piece and the something happened this morning.
$90 million of Democratic money is on hold from donors if Biden is the nominee. $90 million.
George Clooney, I didn't realize he was such a big factor among the donors. He's a big superstar in Hollywood, obviously, but that his piece has caused a lot of rethinking. I didn't know it was $90 million. That's a lot of money. Let's go to Jennifer in Milford. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. How are you?
We're good. Thank you.
First-time caller, long-time listener.
Thank you so much.
So I couldn't disagree more with that gentleman who called about Seth Moulton. It is time for Biden to go. I love him. I always have. But he can't win, and there's no enthusiasm with him. And what could be better than having a convention where everybody tunes in because Biden is not on the top of the ticket? You could have like a day of, applauding Biden for all he's done, and then you usher in the young, new generation of leaders. And I feel like with Biden on the ticket, nobody's going to pay attention to the convention.
Well, Jennifer, can I meet you and raise you one? The James Carville op-ed in the New York Times the other day suggested something that would get even more attention for the next round of Democratic leaders. He suggested, I'm not sure I'm 100% right about this first thing, Marjorie, correct me if I'm wrong, that the issue is who picks the candidates.
Right.
He suggested Presidents Obama and Clinton pick 8 men or women, that they engage in town halls around the country, several town halls, prior to the Democratic convention in August, which, to get to your point, Jennifer, would amass immense amount of attention from the press and the American public. And by the way, not give the stage to Donald Trump for a month. So I am with you on the notion there'd be a lot of interest and potentially a lot of excitement about new leadership, even though the risks that others are mentioning is real. It's a very short period of time to change horses. Jennifer, thanks for your first call. Hope you make another one soon. 877-301-8970.
Yeah, that is the other one of many other fears is the I'm just not inspired to vote person. You know what I mean? That they're just so upset that we've got these 2 men at the top of the ticket. They're just not going to get out there and take the time away from work or get the babysitter, whatever they need to get down there and vote, presuming they don't vote by mail. Anyway, we're talking about continually what you think about President Biden staying in the race. The number is 877-301-8970. That's the number to call or text. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Your neighborhood, your stories.
I'm digital producer Elena Eberwine.
I'm editor Jack Doyle.
Do you have a tip?
Want to offer feedback?
Invite us to an event?
Or want to participate in a listening session?
Feel free to reach out to us.
Email gbhnewsconnect@wgbh.org.
GBH News Connect at wgbh.org. We'd love to hear from you.
Making you part of our newsroom. GBH News Connect at WGBH.org.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Boston Harbor Now, the nonprofit working to ensure Boston's waterfront and harbor islands remain accessible to all and resilient to the impacts of climate change. New membership program info at bostonharbor.org/membership. And Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, featuring a collection of over 700 artifacts. The exhibition is now open at the Castle at Park Plaza in Boston. Tickets and more at theauschwitzexhibition.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about the status of the Biden candidacy on the Democratic side for President of the United States. If last night had any impact on what your position on that was before. Seth Moulton joined us at the top of the show, one of the first Democratic members of Congress to urge him to step aside. Is Moulton on the right side? Would you like to see more Democrats who theoretically, behind the scenes, are saying the exact same thing, but don't have the whatever to say it publicly? Or do you think that Democrats should stay the course with Joe Biden?
Here's a little sound from last night when the president acknowledged that other Democrats could handle being president, but that it would be difficult. Here's Joe Biden.
But I think I'm the best I believe I'm the best qualified to govern. And I think I'm the best qualified to win. But there are other people who could beat Trump too. But it's awful start from scratch.
877-301-8970. Eric in Cambridge. Hey.
Yes, hi. I guess my concern about this, I think Biden should definitely step aside. And I feel like we're risking the future of our democracy, essentially, on him not having another incident like he had at the debate. And if he has another incident like that, especially after the convention, it's game over.
Well, that is a hard to respond to point, actually. That if it happens late, and by the way, I am of the belief there's not going to be a second debate, that Trump would be out of his mind to give up the advantage he got from the first one. But that'd be a real problem. If he's the formal nominee, he's the presumptive nominee now, formal as of mid-August, that would be the end of the game. Eric, thank you for the call.
And that's the thing. That's why I said before, we don't know what happened to him in the debate. Mm-hmm. That doesn't pass the smell test, a cold or being tired.
No, you're totally right.
And not being able to answer, what was the big question he knew he was going to be asked? Are you too old? He completely flubbed it. He couldn't put sentences together. So that's not something that's it's going to be episodic. It's not going to go away. It's not going to get better unless, maybe he's got long COVID or something we don't know about. But the fact that they don't, actually one of the texters mentioned that a few minutes ago, the fact that they're not being straight with us is really disturbing.
Well, also the fact that he's not willing to take a cognitive test, it seems to me that if he was convinced that there wouldn't be a problem, he wouldn't be saying, well, none of my doctors are asking me to do it. The reason Trump is not doing it, obviously, is because he's smart enough to know that he'd do very poorly. A cognitive test, if you've been reading about this the last few days, is not horse, television, animal, air conditioner. It's much deeper than that.
It's hard.
It's doubtful Trump could pass such a thing.
Think of this, Jeff. Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, Bill Clinton. You may not have liked him, but he was really smart. Barack Obama. Here we are in 2024, where we need both men who want to run the world to be taking cognitive tests. Isn't that a little pathetic?
It's not just, what's equally pathetic, we've discussed this on the show many times through the years with absolutely no solution. In 2016 and 2024, the American people have 4 candidates, Trump and Clinton, and then Trump and Biden, who the vast majority of people don't want. Something's wrong with this democracy, and it's not just Donald Trump. It's giving us people who we don't want to vote for. That deserves attention post-November.
Dan in Plymouth, thank you for calling.
Hello, Dan.
Jim, I agree.
Hi.
Thank you.
Sure.
I honestly can't disagree more. Everything you're saying, everything that people are saying about Biden stepping aside, all of it may be true. And God forbid there's an episode as you mentioned him. But here's my take. I think the Democrats are foolish to be asking the president to step aside at this point. And what they should be doing is getting behind him and taking from the Republican playbook and just deny, lie, and just attack Trump, for all of the awful things that he's done and will do to our country, and just go on the offensive and stop this nonsense about finding another candidate. Somebody name a name for me, please. Who is it? There's nobody. Sorry. I'm animated about this.
Dan, yesterday we had the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, on for us. We were talking about this with her, and she was saying that it was kind of like, and that's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Little talk, she didn't use those words, but she was saying what we should be doing, people that are, I'm not a Democrat, but people, worried Democrats or people that want Biden to win, should be doing everything they can. They should be phone banking. They should be going door to door. They should be getting off their rear ends and really working hard to make sure that he wins the presidency, especially in swing states. She was putting a little bit of the onus on us as citizens, which I don't see everybody running out and doing that, but I thought she was right. We have to take a little bit of responsibility.
Dan, I assume you agree with what the Attorney General said yesterday. When you're a phone caller for Joe Biden and the person you're calling cold in Wisconsin says, I was deeply troubled by what I saw during that debate. I love Joe Biden, but I'm not convinced he can govern for 4.5 more years. What would you, as the phone caller for Biden, say to that voter?
Great question, Jim. My response would be, I'll try to be a little less animated than it was a minute ago.
That's fine.
I think I would calmly and coolly explain that. I think, Marjorie, you've articulated this so many times before, that our country is in peril of being taken over again by a tyrant, someone who is, to me, evil personified. So again, I think I would speak to, listen, you could again be concerned about Biden and his ability to govern for another 4 years plus, but the alternative is just. I don't even.
I think that's a pretty good answer, Dan. You should make those calls. Thanks for your call, by the way. We appreciate it. Call us again. 877-301-8970 is our number.
Let's go to, that was Dan Plymouth.
Dan.
Yeah, we're going someplace else now.
Dan.
Sorry, I was reading the text
Oh,
messages
it's okay.
here.
I can do this. Tell us where we're going next in Brighton when you are ready, and we will do that. Lauren in Boston, welcome to the show. Hi. Hi, Lauren.
Hello.
Hello to you.
Bear with me because there's an echo. But so despite my concerns, I certainly share your concerns. I would vote for Biden on a ventilator over Trump.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are with you there, Lauren. If it comes down to that,
But a couple things, if I may.
Yep.
I am sick to my stomach. I think we all are, right? I'm sick to our stomach that someone as corrupt as Trump is tied with someone that has such integrity and has done such for our country over the course of decades. And I'm on the fence between Andrea Campbell, who spoke yesterday, and Seth Moulton, who spoke this morning. On the one hand, we all share these concerns, but to Andrea's point, we don't have a plan. Democrats don't even have a proposed
That's a good
plan,
point.
and the whole process is going to get so messy. And I do, and I listen to you guys all the time. I love you to death, but I do hesitate in that I feel like we are stripping Biden down and have been for a month. The media, and now, of course, a lot of us that are concerned, and we're not serving this very well. And I get it, and you never like my response. I'm always like, well, there's always Kamala Harris, and you guys always kind of slap me down on that. But I don't know. I'm just so sad.
Well, let me just say, Lauren, on the Kamala Harris thing, if you're listening yesterday, I've had one direct experience with her. I mentioned this yesterday. Marjorie was off, so Paris, our colleague, was kind enough to join me at the NAACP. We interviewed Kamala Harris for 15 minutes or so, and we are going to play that next week for people. She was fabulous. And that's a different setting. It's a different setting from speaking to a crowd or doing a debate. But that's my only face-to-face experience with her, and she was really impressive. So you won't hear that from me. And let me respond to there's no plan.
She was not a great candidate when she ran for
president.
president.
It was 4 years ago. I don't know if she'd be a great candidate now,
well,
but
she
that
might
was 4 years ago.
A great president. Being a great candidate and being a great president are two different things.
Well, if you're not a
obviously.
good candidate, you're probably never going to get a chance to be a great candidate, a great president.
Well, some of them
But
do.
can I say something, Lauren, about there's no plan? There is clearly a plan. We just don't know what it is. There's zero chance, that people who want in the Democratic Party who want Biden gone, like James Carville, who did announce his plan in the New York Times, are not coming up with something. They can't announce it because talk about disrespect to the sitting president, particularly if he stays in. Again, I don't know if we're going to like the plan, but I say with great confidence that there is one. We'll just have to see if we ever get to it. Lauren, thanks for an excellent call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970. The point you made at the beginning of this thing, which is really important,
What?
this has got to come to a head really quickly for a whole variety of reasons. And by the way, if it did come to a head next week, I said to Chuck Todd yesterday, I thought from the Republican convention, if Joe Biden decides that he is not going to continue as a candidate. I don't know if he's done that. Half the pundits, a word I hate, are saying he is absolutely committed, particularly after last night, because he did do well, even though haltingly, on the content, foreign policy stuff, which is an area of expertise. But if he decides to step down, I think all the attention shifts away from Republicans in Milwaukee to the Democratic search for a candidate.
A lot of people are talking about Biden's speech issues that he's had his whole life. He had a stutter his whole life, and he was known as a gaffe machine. If you looked Biden and gaffe online, like 20 years ago, you'd see all this stuff. At our old radio station, we used to fill up a blooper reel every single solitary week of all my mistakes.
I had a few in there.
Well, I was at a league of my own. I think we can agree about that. Because I had to go to speech class, too. But that didn't have to do with age. I was young then. So their point is that if you have these problems when you're young, they get worse as you age.
Wait, the stuttering or the gaffes? The gaffes were stupidity,
not
like
the
his
gaffes,
comment
not
about...
the gaffes. The mixing the words together, like you're slurring his words and having...
with all due respect, that's a ridiculous point. You have to look...
I don't think that's...
Look at the videos of Joe Biden from 2022. Forget 1990. He is a dramatically different, much older in terms of performance human being. You may be fine with that, but...
My point is if you spend much of your childhood trying to
with a stutter.
A speech impediment, that in your old age, it comes back.
You think the stutter was the problem
I think
a week ago Thursday or last night?
I think he's got a problem with slurring his words together that I think is probably having to do with his speech issues from childhood. I'm not
How many times last night in the middle of a sentence of a thought did he say, anyway, and then stop the thought? Did that have anything to do with his stutter?
That did not have to do with his stutter.
Yeah.
That was losing his train of thought.
He lost his train of thought.
Yeah.
Exactly right, which is a real troubling kind of thing.
Do we have time to squeeze in one
We
more
don't.
call?
But in any case, thank you for your calls. And we will, obviously, any development in this thing, we will bring you throughout the next couple of hours.
Okay, we are going to be joined right after the noon news by GBH's Callie Crossley. We are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. And we also have a little special feature today, in addition to our TikTok page. We have a wonderful feature on YouTube of Jim caressing a little,
It's not just Jim,
practically newborn baby goat. And you never looked happier, Jim.
It was kissing me. Do you know that?
It
Little
was-
goat was
it was
kissing.
licking
And
your
much more
face.
importantly, you know what it was not doing on me?
What
Exactly.
you were worried about.
What I
It
was
was resting its little head right on your arm.
Is that
It
like
was
the sweetest animal you ever saw in your
very,
life?
very beautiful. And the reason we had them in is because these baby goats do yoga.
Well, they don't do yoga. They help you
they
do
do
yoga.
a downward goat, Jim. You didn't know about
But
that?
I'm bummed. Thank you very much.
Okay,
That's a
up
good
next,
one.
Callie Crossley. You're listening again to Boston Public Radio 89.7.
Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and
GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Boston Public Radio. To vet potential VP candidates, did Trump ask South Carolina Senator Tim Scott if he'd say the election was stolen. GBH's Cal.
Cigar bars, oh my. Plus the fate of liquor licenses and happy hours in Massachusetts. All that ahead, Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Biden re-election campaign has returned to the campaign trail under a greater sense of urgency within the Democratic Party. The next stop for the president is Detroit. He says he intends to keep running for a second term because he still has work to finish. But so far, Biden has yet to halt the growing wave of allies worried about his cognitive abilities and his chances for beating former President Donald Trump in November. NPR's Domenico Montanaro reports on a new NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll out today.
The race is statistically unchanged, according to our poll. It found that Biden actually gained a point from last month's Marist survey when it was 49-49, dead heat between him and Trump. Now it's Biden ever so narrowly ahead, 50-48. Biden does slip a little when third parties are introduced, with Trump ahead by just 1 point. But listen to what we're talking about here. 2 points, 1 point, all of that is within the poll's margin of error, as this race has been the entire time. And that's maybe the biggest conclusion here, that nothing has really changed wildly since the debate.
NPR's Domenico Montanaro reporting. Former President Trump is scheduled to campaign in western Pennsylvania tomorrow. The Republican National Convention is next week in Milwaukee. AT&T is acknowledging today that hackers stole data from nearly all of its cellular customers. NPR's Rachel Treisman has the latest.
AT&T said records from 2022 were illegally downloaded in April from the company's workspace on a third-party cloud platform. They contain information about customers' calls and texts, including which other phone numbers they interacted with, for how long, and how many times. But they don't include the content of those conversations, customers' names, or other personal information. AT&T believes the data is no longer publicly available and says law enforcement has already arrested one suspect. Customers will be notified if they were affected and can also check on AT&T's website. Rachel Treisman, NPR News.
Central Vermont is still reeling from flash floods caused by remnants of the storm Beryl. Vermont Public Radio's Abigail Giles has the latest.
State officials say more than 100 people have been rescued from floodwaters. People in the village of Johnson were fearful as they watched the river rise. This is the third time the village has flooded in a year. Melissa Wright rents in a flood-prone part of town. She says the rising water is stressful, but she can't afford to leave.
I've been in Vermont for 36 years.
Wow. So this is that big.
I raised my kids here, so I really enjoyed it until all this flooding's happening, and it's just continuous.
Johnson was hit less hard than last year, but the waters continue to rise downstream. For NPR News, I'm Abigail Giles in Johnson, Vermont.
The Dow is up nearly 300 points. You're listening to NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The state Senate passed a nearly $3 billion economic development package late last night after beefing up the legislation with a host of new policy ideas. As GBH's Katie Lannon reports, that includes a measure that would bring most 18-year-olds charged with crimes into the juvenile court system.
Adult court jurisdiction in Massachusetts currently begins at age 18. But Senate Democrats say that older teens charged with crimes are often still in high school and can have better outcomes through the juvenile justice system. Right now, the change is only part of the Senate package. So it's one of many points where that chamber and the Massachusetts House will need to reach agreement in short order. That's with the legislative session coming to a close at the end of the month. Katie Lannon, GBH News 89.7.
Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey's administration has extended the temporary freeze on executive branch hiring that began in April through the end of October. Healey says that for the time being, she's focused on selective critical hiring through exemptions and waivers, and that's going to happen through Halloween. She adds that it ensures the state start the new fiscal year in the best possible position when it comes to managing the state's checkbook. In sports, Red Sox, Kansas City Royals take over Fenway tonight. They are into the gentlemen's semifinals at Wimbledon today. Carlos Alcaraz has beaten Daniil Medvedev in advance to the final. Alcaraz will play the winner of Djokovic-Musetti match, which is just getting underway now. Sun, clouds, maybe an afternoon shower today, high in the mid-80s. We are at 85 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Hey, it's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back here at the Boston Public Library on Tuesday with Billy Starr from the Pan Mass Challenge, NBC Sports' Trenny Casey, Christopher Muther, the great travel writer for the Boston Globe, and CNN's John King. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. We're joined now by GBH's Callie Crossley. Callie's the host of Under the Radar with Callie Crossley. You can catch that Sunday nights at 89.7 at 6. You can also hear her Callie commentaries on Mondays for GBH's Morning Edition. And she's also co-host for GBH's The Culture Show, which airs daily at 2 o'clock on 89.7. And today at 2 o'clock, it is here live at the Boston Public Library. Hello, Callie.
Hello. How are you?
Hello, Callie Crossley. Yeah. So we have been talking about Biden's performance last night, President Biden's performance last night at the press conference, and of course following the NATO get-together. What'd you think?
Well, obviously it was a much stronger performance than the debate performance. I mean, that was just so shocking for everybody. It was a reminder that he very much knows foreign policy, and I think it was also a reminder writ large of what it means in the world. If someone like him is in charge, and if someone like him or not like him is in charge.
Yeah.
Because we're reminded again that we're in a global situation, and we really need to have some folks at the top who can negotiate and navigate some very delicate situations.
So should he stay in, you think?
Well, I don't. It's again, when we had this conversation, I think post-debate. You know, my initial response was about the structure of how one votes or how a party handles a candidate. And that hasn't changed. I mean, the time is getting shorter and shorter, but, you know, somebody has to make a decision. And I guess if he feels very strongly, as he indicated he did, that he can do it, no one can tell him he can't do it because those delegates are tied to him. So I don't, and then again, what I thought was interesting is that it was very strong support of Kamala Harris. You know, I'm not sure we had heard that before. He wasn't saying in case, but I picked her because she could be president. So that was important to hear. So maybe that's a signal to some people that if they were going to try to change anything, that the only thing they really could change was to really circle the wagons and get behind her, and then figure out who would be a good vice president in that situation. I don't know. It's really, I think what you get a good sense of is that some decisions have to be made rather quickly.
Rather quickly, yeah. It's fraught.
Yeah, it's very fraught.
As we used to say in high school English class.
We're talking to Callie Crossley. You know, Callie, I love that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez filed an impeachment measure with the House of Representatives directed at the two rogue, potentially criminal justices, associate justices, Alito and Thomas. She says they have committed high crimes and misdemeanors. There is no chance in the world that it's going to get a majority.
Yeah, she just made a point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it seemed, we've talked to people who believe, we both, Marjorie and I, believe the Supreme Court is the greatest threat that faces America, maybe even greater than Trump, and clearly even a greater threat if Trump is reelected. A lot of people talk about expanding the court. Why don't they file the damn bill so at least you can talk about it,
right,
even if there aren't votes for it? And so it seems to me that even though it's a pipe dream, to say the least, she did an important thing to focus attention on them. Do you agree or no?
Yeah, and you know what it reminded me of? The Republicans were quick to just file impeachment against any Democrat they see for many years running. So I thought to myself, first of all, I didn't know you could impeach a Supreme Court justice.
Oh, you can.
I did not know that. Yeah.
One may have been impeached and maybe even removed. I'm not sure. One of our colleagues will check, but go ahead.
But I thought that was amazing that she did this, and what it allowed is to detail all of the failings, the scandals, to remind people, this is what I'm talking about. Somebody has to address the fact that these people are doing all this stuff, and they're hearing from the same people. They don't even think about recusing themselves. That, to me, I just can't get over that.
Yeah.
I mean, I really can't get over that. I don't know if people would feel differently if they, we'd have to acknowledge that they were still doing some things that are problematic for sure, but at least have the professionalism, I guess, and I can't even say decency, but the professionalism, you came up through the system, you're in the legal system, you're supposed to recuse yourself.
Yeah.
This is what gets me, is that this. Someone is standing before you that worked with your wife, and specifically about January 6th. Are you kidding? I just...
Well, Ocasio-Cortez is not just talking about the conflicts,
Yeah.
but she's also talking about the gifts that are
Yeah,
inappropriate,
absolutely.
maybe crossing a line. At least she thinks they're high crimes and misdemeanors, some of which were not reported until they were forced to, and some of which are still not reported from what we understand. But I'm glad you agree. Get it out there. Get it on the table, fight for it, if possible, and it won't be possible in this case, to get the Republicans on the record supporting those two guys. So I commend her for it, and I think all these things that matter that affect the Supreme Court, the Democrats should take the lead on rather than just talking about it in interviews.
So let me add this and say just that there are probably many other people who might have done it but feel like I don't want to be out in the spotlight, having said this for whatever reasons. She's always been under fire. No. So this is like nothing for her. You're firing at me on a good day. So I'm just going to file impeachment, and it'll be just another day in my political life.
Well, good for her.
You know what I thought was a wild story that I've never heard of before? These people are running around that live in Barcelona, running around with water pistols, shooting them at tourists because they're sick of being overrun in the summertime.
Yeah.
And they're sick of people in the Airbnb shooting up the price of housing and all this kind of stuff. So I guess you have to be careful now. If you go to Europe, some of these European cities, July or August, they don't want us there.
Okay, let me just ask this question.
What?
Have y'all traveled to Europe in the summertime?
No.
Have you?
No.
Not for a bunch of years, but yeah.
Do you remember Americans in Europe in the summertime?
The ugly Americans?
I mean, I'm not advocating for shooting tourists with water pistols.
However,
seriously, sometimes I just have to say,
the rude Americans.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
The
slovenly
assumptions. This should be this. I've been in situations. I travel with a group to Cuba. It's not quite the same thing, but you get my drift.
You went to Cuba?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I'd go back in 2 seconds. It was really very interesting. But anyway, in my group of people who should have known better because we were journalists, one of them went into we were pulled over at a rest stop, and she went in to purchase a T-shirt or something and came back all mad because they didn't have her size. And our tour guide waited until we all got on the bus. He could have been fired for this. And he said, "Do you understand communism? Do you? I mean, he gave her appropriately a lecture and said, "How dare you?" I mean, I've seen some bad stuff out here. So I'm not advocating that, but I understand. That's the reason why a lot of Europeans are not even around in the summertime.
Yeah, they get out of town.
Because they just can't take it anymore.
Well, you know who addresses some of these things? Is a guy who's with us once a month. He suggests not going to the tourist traps or the number one on the average list, but go to some of the out-of-the-way communities, out-of-the-way restaurants, out-of-the-way museums, and those kinds of things, in part to be respectful of people there, and in part for your own benefit to not be surrounded by zillions of people. I think it's great.
What kind of demanding American food? Like everybody wants a cheeseburger. Well, maybe they don't have cheeseburgers in this particular part of the Europe that you're in, and people getting offended by that kind of thing, or not having the kind of liquor that you want. Maybe you want to have a martini. Well, maybe they're not big on martinis.
Do you not feel, let me ask you, you and your sister have your parents' house on the Cape.
We do.
Would you not like to shoot all the rest of us with water pistols when we cross the Sagamore Bridge? I mean, the Cape in summer is really overpopulated. It's horrible.
July 4th is a bad time to be down the Cape. Everything is like overrun.
Don't you feel like you're under siege? Tell the truth.
I don't go to places that are crowded, so I avoid the places that are crowded. And people always talk about the traffic going to and from the Cape. Sometimes it's terrible. Sometimes it's not so terrible.
Well, because you go midnight. I
don't always go midnight, but I'm trying to go today right after the show, Jim. So I'm hoping to beat the
I've seen
traffic
some
out of town.
bad behavior on Martha's Vineyard as well.
Oh yeah,
you know,
like what?
Well, particularly in the last few years when there is, can people read, a shortage of workers, okay? So you go to these restaurants, and I love to go to the restaurants, you want to support them, and they're short-staffed.
Yeah.
You can see that they're short-staffed. You can see that there's 5 billion people out here behind them. Why are you grumpy? Because you waited too long to come in and to do that. That's not their problem, And then after being grumpy, why are you not tipping? I mean, come on. You're in a resort. You knew you were coming to a resort. You knew it was crowded in the summertime. You need to take a chill pill. I mean, the only other time where I could see where some parents would get on edge if they got these kids that, haven't been fed or whatever. Again, that's some planning that needs to happen. I don't have kids, so people can write me and say, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, that's fine. But I've seen mannerly kids with parents who have planned, and then I've seen some not so with parents who have not planned. And then they're acting out in the restaurants and in the shops. And I just feel, sometimes I've just actually gone over to the wait staff and said, I just feel I need to apologize. I don't know what to say.
I love that.
Because I'm just so embarrassed on behalf of those folks. That's just not necessary.
Well, there's a sense of entitlement. And Margie's going to say, oh, you understand a sense of entitlement, Jim. Don't you? Go ahead. You're thinking that, right?
Well, I always thought, and I waited tables for a long time, and I always thought that there are people that come out because they want to harass and take out
interesting.
there are people that just want to give the waitress or wait person,
servers we call them.
Servers, a hard time, And what the hostess with the place, I used to work at the old Red Coach Grill. Remember the Red Coach Grills? They're out of business now.
I've heard about it.
Yeah, they were great places to work when I was young. Anyway, she would say that what you do is the more upset they get with you, the more saccharine you are.
Yes, you have to. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry that there's not enough ice in your glass. Let me bring over a whole big bucket of ice and you can just load it up.
That's one tactic.
Yeah.
I told Marjorie, I can't repeat this on the air, when I was a busboy and a waiter at Grossinger's for 4 summers, if somebody messed with you, there's a price to pay.
Yeah,
there is a price to pay. And I unfortunately cannot say, even though the statute of limitations is run, what the price is. But if you're abusive towards the server, particularly in a setting where there are a ton of people, that wasn't obviously pandemic times, you pay them back. That's all I can say. Did you ever do that kind of work?
No, I haven't. But here's my ode to folks who were always servers. I brought up my niece and nephew. They're grown now. When the server gets to the table and there are choices, don't make them go through the choices. You can read, pick the choices. When she or he gets to the table, say, I want it with this, I want that, I don't want that. Do not, that makes me insane. How many times does a server have to repeat that over and over again? It's right there on the thing.
Or you're in an absolutely packed restaurant where the server is overwhelmed and they come over to take the order and somebody is,
I'm so with you.
They've never waited tables.
Right.
The poor waiter is.
Well, can I add one to this, which is not a server situation? Target is no longer taking checks.
Yes.
How do you feel about somebody in line in front of you at the cashier?
Writing a check?
No, not writing a check, starting to write a check.
Insane.
After they are told how much a thing is. They could have filled in Target, the date, the signature, whatever, and then maybe just filled in the dollar amount. Is there anything? So are you troubled by the fact that Target is not taking checks?
I am, because I just think it's going to lead to some, disparities in how people are able to pay, because I worry about that along the cash lines, because I am a cash person a lot.
Still?
Yes, because I think it's,
You don't want to leave a trace?
No, you know what happened? Well, that I could do that. But I think it also helps you to realize, what you're doing. Listen, I love a debit card or a credit card. Don't get me wrong. But if you are using cash, a fair amount of time, you understand. Well, there's no more now. You've used it up.
Debit card comes close to cash. I mean, because even though you don't see it or feel it in the moment,
that's the big
it's
thing.
taken. I know it is, but it's taken directly out of your deal. So can you at least agree?
To me, it's much tougher spending $100 in cash than it is spending $100
How about this
on a debit card.
Check,
It really
since we
is.
disagree.
Yeah.
You may use a check,
Yeah.
but only if it's partially filled out when they tell you how much. Otherwise, you're disqualified. Can we agree on that?
I can do that.
I was
or
hoping.
they could do. I think they could do a line of this is the only line for checks. To me, that works. That's
not a horrible idea either.
Because then obviously that's going to be a slower line, and that's just the price you pay because you've decided you wanted to write a check. And sometimes I like to write.
When was the last time you wrote a check?
Oh, I write checks all the time.
You do?
Oh, absolutely.
To whom?
All kinds of folks, because you know what? When the grid goes down, y'all are screwed.
That's right. That's right.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I used to like to write them better when took a day or two for them to deposit them in the bank, and if you were kind of caught between paychecks, you could go for.
Yes.
But that's no more, right?
Yeah,
they can deposit them right away, so that scam is over.
It's illegal, by the way.
Well, statute of limitations is run on that one too, Jim. I'm making more money now. Okay, what's on the radio this weekend, Callie Cross? The Under the Radar, Sunday night, 6 o'clock on GBH.
Well, we brought the experts, the political experts, the mass politics profs, who are political scientists, to dissect, of course, the main topic of the potential withdrawal of Joe Biden and what that means writ large. We're also talking about former President Trump and Project 2025. And because I host the show, we have to talk about black jobs, of course.
Can you believe Trump said that?
Yes, I can't believe it.
What a jerk.
I can't believe it. So we have to talk about black jobs. Governor Healy and the migrant crisis and all of the ramifications of that, ballot questions, and also the possible return of Scott Brown.
Whoa, where?
I did not know
He
that.
said maybe I might want to come back to Massachusetts.
Really?
Huh, and run for office?
He's not talking about the Elizabeth Warren race. Elizabeth Warren race?
He didn't pick any race. He just said.
He's living in New Hampshire now, for those who don't know. Yeah.
Maybe I'd like to.
Senator Brown.
I didn't even know that. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that. Don't go into what you're about to go into. It is totally not necessary.
I'm not going to go into anything.
Okay, fine. Are you willing to tell us anything about the show at 2 o'clock or no?
No, she's not.
So let's see. Let me see. What can I give you? Oh, you know what? I'll give you something that I feel
Thank you.
Very excited to talk about, and most people don't know about. Frankie Beverly and Maze. That's a group that's been around for more than 40 years. Frankie Beverly just retired. What does that mean to you? Probably nothing. But one of his 4 songs that he's been singing for 40 years is literally the black anthem for cookouts and weddings.
Oh, come on. Okay.
It is the electric slide background. It is it. So we are talking about, because he's retired, what it means, the magnificence culture of it. Wesley Morris, who used to work at the Globe, as you know, and at the New York Times, he said, if you hold up your phone and play the song anywhere, black people will run to it.
Why don't you sing 30 seconds?
I can't. I really can't sing. It has a lead in.
You can sing. We've heard you sing on the radio.
No, not well. So this one is.
Oh, yes, well.
Okay.
So you'll have to wait and get that.
Okay, 2 o'clock.
Right.
Thank you, Callie Crossley. Good to see you.
Okay.
We've been speaking with Callie Crossley, host of Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, which you can catch Sunday nights at 89.7 at 6 o'clock. You can catch Callie's commentaries Mondays for GBH's Morning Edition. She's also co-host of the aforementioned Culture Show, which airs daily. And today, after the 2 o'clock news, it's right after 2 o'clock news every day. But today it's going to be right here at the Boston Public Library. Thank you very much, Callie Crossley. Up next, our tech guru, Andy Anat.
AI chatbot expand the imagination of humans? Supporters say writers could draw inspiration from AI. Critics disagree, saying it makes art less diverse. So scientists asked people to come up with stories, with and without a chatbot's help.
My heart is racing as the door opens. There, in front of us, is an alien.
The results of an AI creative writing challenge on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and Hebrew Senior Life, a Harvard Medical School affiliate, empowering seniors to reach their full potential with a wide range of services. You can discover senior living, healthcare, aging research, and more at allweareforyou.org. And Revision Energy. Sunbug Solar is now part of Revision Energy, a solar installer committed to being a renewable energy partner for New England and working to fight climate change. Learn more at sunbugsolar.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browder. We're joined now at the library by tech writer, blogger, and podcaster India Notko.
Customer had all of their data exfiltrated by a hacker group. All the data concerns the mid-2022, but I'm saying it's not like, oh, someone managed to copy some stuff. They got all of it. So if you were an AT&T customer, you're probably going to get a message from AT&T very, very soon warning you that your data has been compromised. Now, one slightly optimistic thing about it, so they didn't get your text message. The hackers did not get your text messages. They don't get the content of your calls, but that's pretty much all they did not get. The data that they managed to exfiltrate includes your phone number, the phone number of everybody you called or texted on your mobile phone during that period in 2022, the cell tower that you were connected to through at the time, which means that essentially your location through that period of 2022 has been pretty effectively tracked throughout. This is nearly as bad as it gets without any financial information.
And why do they want it, and what can they do with this information?
Sell it, sell it, sell it. It's hard to really explain how commoditized and professionally businessified hacking has become. There is, as a matter of fact, the tool that was used to exfiltrate this data, it's not just, movie hackers like with Hot Pockets, like, I bypassed the slip server on the www. It's they go to a website that is much like when you subscribe to like a music service and says, hey, we have this service that can break into A, B, and C. Here's what we charge. There are 4 levels of service. You want it for $250 a month. You want it for $500 a month. You want it for $1,000 a month. The tools and the specific tool that was used to do this is kind of a commercial product that you can use to break this.
So if you're an AT&T customer, while you're waiting for AT&T to contact you, what do? Nothing?
There's nothing you can do. You have to. AT&T will be in touch, probably to offer. Here's how you can do some tracking to see what's happening with your data. It's pretty bad. The worst part of this is, and this is why it's really important to talk about this right now, is that even if you're not an AT&T customer, pretty much everybody in the world is being affected by what's being referred to for the past month or so as the Snowflake breach. Snowflake is a company that you've never heard of that is basically 10,000 different corporations, AT&T, Ticketmaster, banks, insurance companies, a burger joint at the side of the street. This is one of those services that will host host a database of data and perform data analysis of it. So if AT&T says, hey, I've got these customer records, I'm trying to figure out where we need to build new cell towers. AT&T doesn't have to build their own computers and services to do that. They simply hire Snowflake, they upload it into their cloud. That's why they have this data. But they have it from so many different companies. And the reason why we're calling it the Snowflake breach is that the criminal community has figured out some way to get in there to basically log in as clients of Snowflake and access that personal data. The researchers are still trying to figure out exactly how they're doing it. There is a specific tool with a kind of a rude name that they're using to automate the process of once you decide that, hey, I want data from AT&T, here's how you get the data that AT&T has stored from there. But it doesn't seem to be like that the Snowflake company had a colossal failure of security. It seems as though these are just theories from researchers so far that they managed to install, criminals managed to install a piece of malware on a Snowflake employee's computer, which allowed them to get access to certain areas of the system that allowed them to figure out how tokens and logins are created, which allowed them to get into accounts that are themselves not very securely protected. Snowflake has said that they're really trying to backpedal this because this could be catastrophic for the company. But they're trying to make it sound as though, well, AT&T, they didn't use two-factor authentication, and that's why they got breached.
But when you say sell it, do you mean that this would make it easier for people to phish you, trying to get you to reveal your information or your social security, posing as X company or X bank, or what does it practically mean that could happen to you?
Well,
Taking your bank account?
Well, the thing is, it's hard to answer that question quickly because there's nothing they can't do. You're talking about you're buying flour from a mill. You're asking what can they do with that flour? Well, whatever they want to do with it. So if I have an interest in AT&T's data, and this data appears on the open market, background, Ticketmaster is one of the first companies that got affected by the Snowflake problem, before it was even called the Snowflake problem. 500 million consumer records, including names, addresses, phone numbers, the tickets they ordered, some credit card numbers were exfiltrated, and then they appeared on these hacker marketplaces for $500,000.
Okay.
So, but I'll give you an example. So let's say someone wants to know, someone finds this AT&T data for sale. And again, I'm talking about it is an open marketplace. You have to be a criminal in order to be able to find it and access it, but it is a marketplace. I have an idea to say, well, here's a database of what every single AT&T customer was doing, essentially, for 3 months. Let's say that I'm managing a political campaign. I would like to know where my candidate's opponent was for 3 or 4 months. I want to know who they were talking to. I won't get the messages that say, hi, ha, 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 I can't believe that I'm cheating on my wife with you and stealing money from the treasury of my state, and yet everybody thinks I'm a really great, wonderful person. Ha, 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 what fools. They're not going to get the message, but they're going to find out, gee, what's this number right here that he seems to be texting to all the time? And then they can buy from someplace else, give me all the information about who owns this number. And they can find out that, gee, he seems to be connecting to this cell tower a lot, and that has nothing to do with his office or his business, and it has as the nearest cell tower to the motel where he's shacking up.
Yeah.
So that's just one example. Again, it's flour. You can bake it into donuts, cakes, breads. You can throw it in people's faces.
You can also find out all the people that Donald Trump doesn't know working on Project 2025, who he's calling every day. Andy Anatko, you wrote us a brilliant memo about the battle by Apple to try to catch up with their phones to what Google is already doing AI. Don't be offended. I don't give a damn about the battle. What I care a lot about is you gave some examples that were so exciting to me, practical examples of what AI on our phones will mean for us in terms of our everyday lives and things we could do. Can you give us a couple of examples? Start with this photograph editing, for lack of a better expression, thing that one can do.
Well, this is something that I'm doing on the phone in my pocket. Google has. I won't give you the whole backstory. As you can tell by the thing I sent you, I love this as a storytelling thing. Where 10 years ago, both Apple and Google internally decided, gee, what direction is the future of technology going in? Because we want to be right there when that revolution happens. And I'm literally almost at the same time. Apple said, you know what's going to be about? Self-driving cars and virtual reality goggles. And they spent 10 years and $10 billion developing a self-driving car that they finally canceled last year. They released the VR goggles at a moment where no one cares, no one in the industry cares.
$3,500 too, right?
Yeah, and it's terrible. At the same time, the CEO of Google was on stage at a developer conference saying that we are pivoting our company to AI. We think artificial intelligence is going to be as important to technology as the revolution of the smartphone was, and so we are going to start investing heavily in research and stuff like that. And that's why the iPhone in your pocket and the iPhone in my pocket takes pictures that are roughly the same quality, but the Android phone made by Google in my pocket. If there is a trash can in the back, I snap a picture and there's a trash can in the back of the scene, I say, ooh, I didn't see that trash can. I can just simply circle it with my finger, tap, erase.
It's amazing.
It will identify the trash can, remove it, and then fill in the background with grass. If there was a fence that looks like it was behind it, it will recreate the fence using generative AI, and it will be dang near perfect.
Give us another example. You mentioned that one of the promises, and they are only promises yet in terms of Apple saying that we're going to catch up, is you asked Siri, when is mom's flight landing? Yeah. And what happens?
Yeah, we're talking about this because Apple has finally said, yeah, we got to get on this horse and quickly. So they had their own developer conference last month in which everybody, including investors and analysts and people like me, were like, okay, Mr. Hotshot, Mr. Self-driving car AR goggles, what are you going to do about AI? So they spent an hour laying out a long-term strategy. So this isn't a feature you're going to get right now, but one of the things they were talking about is making their voice assistant understand all the detail in your life, because Apple is already a very, very private and secure company, but it knows that you have your life on your phone through your messages, through your searches, through your emails, your contacts. So you can be able to ask Siri a question. Excuse me, Shlomo, I try not to say that word because I don't want to activate people's phones. So you can say, Shlomo, what time do I have to pick up my mom? How do you parse that question? Well, Apple Intelligence will say, I know who Andy's mom is. I know that because and I also know that she emailed him 2 months ago with this email with the flight information. I also know that he's supposed to be picking up mom when the flight comes in. So it's not just going to find that email and say, oh, you're picking up mom at one. Excuse me, you should leave the house right now. What it will do is it will also know that, okay, but flights can be delayed. So Andy has a flight tracking app. I'm going to check with that flight tracking app to see if mom's flight is on time. No, it's been delayed 45 minutes. Okay, now I'm going to use this mapping app to figure out what's traffic like. Ooh, traffic is backed up on I-95, and that tunnel situation is horrible. Let's add 45 minutes for the flight delay, an hour and 10 for the traffic delay, and hi, Andy, you should probably leave the house around 45 minutes from now.
So that is both thrilling and terrifying to me at the same time. Should the terrifying not be troubling because you say Apple is so secure? It's basically searching your whole life to answer that simple question.
I mean, Apple did a really good job in this keynote of putting all of this in context. They're really not doing anything more sophisticated than what Google has put on their phones like 2 years ago, pretty much. But they put it in the right context of saying, I know you're probably worried that this is going to be just a useless, technological thing. That's why they give examples like, what time do I have to pick up my mom? They also know that you're probably worried about, but AI is slurping all of our data, and also their beating point against Google and Facebook is always that, oh, well, they're trying to steal your data. We're always trying to protect your data. So they're the ones, so they're saying that, look at all this data that you're giving us. You're trusting us with it for a good reason. That means that we can leverage all of this for your benefit. But they're also outlining all the different ways in which they are not going to be exploiting your data in any way, shape, or form that doesn't benefit you, including, yes, it's going to be looking at all of your photos. So if you are typing on some sort of registration site of the DMV and you don't know what your license plate number is, you can just, with your cursor is in that little field, you can say, Shlomo, put my license plate number in there. And because at some point when you were picking up your mom, you took a picture of your car so you remember where you parked, the photo analyzer knows what the license plate number is from there, paste it right in. So what I'm getting at is that they're also saying that we are not going to be using that picture to train our AI and to teach our AI anything. We don't use that for any purpose like that. They have built an entire they use most of their AI is being done on the phone itself, which is what Google is doing, which is what most people are doing because it's just more efficient and quicker. But even when the AI system has to be so sophisticated that your phone can't run it, it will connect outside to get there, but it will be connecting to an Apple server running Apple hardware and on a special custom operating system they wrote specifically for artificial intelligence. They're calling it private cloud compute, where it's not just they're promising that they're not going to retain the data that gets sent into the cloud about the query. The operating system itself does not have the feature of persistent storage. If you had this installed on your laptop and you created a file, as soon as you hit return, and that file would disappear because the system does not have the ability to save data. That's how important they take privacy, and that's how much they know that they can't be there with the same level of overall sophistication as Google by now. However, they can make it a much better product by, again, underlining the privacy and security and always talking about it not as a research project, but as here are features that are coming to an iPhone next year.
Okay, so that's the good news. The only bad news is they're destroying the planet while they're doing this.
I'm embarrassed
Other than
to
that,
say,
that's not a big deal.
I didn't realize
6 of one, half dozen the other. Break some eggs, break some
the
eggs.
amount of water, energy, I mean, this is really terrible for the environment, all this iCloud computing services. I mean,
and we're not talking about Apple here. We're talking about the entire industry.
Yeah.
AI has created a gold rush, and just like the original gold rush, it's causing an immense damage to the planet because AI consumes an immense amount of power, an immense amount of water. For instance, it's been estimated that if you do a Google search for when did Donald Sutherland die, the Google search will take a certain amount of energy. If you ask ChatGPT the same question, the AI, it will consume 10 times as much energy.
Why?
Because AI requires high-power processors. It's not just simply checking something from a database. Also, AI is fairly new, so ways of optimizing that power usage and optimizing that efficiency haven't really been landed on yet. But the bigger problem is that the machinery to train these AIs, not just run them, but teach the AI how to, again, get information off of a license plate, that consumes an ungodly amount of energy. And this is Google, along with a whole bunch of other companies, including Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, it became very, very trendy about 5 years ago to promise, oh, we care about Mother Earth. We're promised to be net zero by 2030. And so Google committed to this plan, but also committed to, we're going to release a progress report every single year. Well, that document dropped last week, and they had to kind of sheepishly say that in the time since they made that promise, they've been doing a lot of work on AI. Their energy consumption from 2019 to 23 has doubled. Their greenhouse emissions overall are up nearly 50%. And then, by the way, this document refers not just to what they're doing with servers and AI, but also the trucks that take the phones that they build from one, so it's inclusive. But however, the energy emissions that are just related to their cloud operations are up 37% year after year, representing about a quarter of Google's entire greenhouse gas emissions.
well, are they planning on doing anything about that, or is there nothing to be done?
There are a couple of things.
Maybe we should leave the garbage can in the photograph.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the best solution. Go ahead, Andy.
They're adding some more recycling cans.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of this particular problem, again, this is affecting everybody. This is affecting Microsoft. It will affect Apple. They're not doing it themselves, but they can't train all this AI that they need. They're going to be releasing next year. They don't have the firepower to train it themselves. They are hiring Google to use their servers and their cloud compute and their AI systems to train the artificial intelligence systems that they're going to need next year. So their neck is up. They're as big a problem pretty much as anybody else. Okay, but solutions. We can hope that, again, this is just inefficiency of an early technology. Google just, I think it was 2 days ago or 3 days ago, they released a paper about a new system for training AI they're calling Jest, that they claim is about 10 times more energy efficient. That leads into reason number 2 to be optimistic, which is that who is paying for this power and who is paying for all these computers? It is Microsoft, it is Google, it is Apple who's paying for this computer time. So business-wise, it is very much in their best interest to do this as cheaply as possible, consume as least amount of energy as possible. And thirdly, they're also learning that the ways that they're doing it right now are pretty wasteful. For instance, one of the reasons why it costs so much power is that you need to slurp in. If I want to train an AI-based camera operator, okay, I need to give it trillions and trillions of units of information to teach it how to operate a camera. However, a lot of that information that I've given it just isn't very valuable. So there are new techniques being developed to figure out, actually, we only need to take a look at maybe a quarter of this data. Google is actually training, oddly enough, the tail wagging the dog, or the snake biting its own tail. It is training an AI consuming power to learn how to differentiate good training data from bad training data. I'm hoping that within the next 5 years or 10 years from now, we will see much, much, much more efficiency, just like we're seeing much more efficient cars. However, we're definitely on the clock here. There are estimates about AI is going to double the rate of U.S. electricity demand and consumption by 2030. A fifth of Ireland's national power usage in 2022 was by data centers. And we haven't even talked about water yet. We know how well things work out when we just cross our hearts and hope that a big industry does the right thing for Mother Earth.
Okay, Andy
Anacco, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
We have been speaking with tech writer, blogger, and podcaster Andy Anacco, who joins us monthly to explain things to us. You can reach him at Anacco, which is IHNATKO. Did I get that right? Okay, that's good. Thank you very much, Andy Anacco. Up next, we're going to talk with Love Letters columnist Meredith Goldstein from the Boston Globe, all about relationships. We're going to talk about somebody who wants to get in contact with her boyfriend's friends, and someone who fell for a bartender. I think a lot of people have that experience. She's next, Meredith Goldstein, that is, from the Boston Globe. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, Democrats publicly debate President Joe Biden's withdrawal from the presidential campaign, while the Supreme Court upends precedent and policy. Our mass politics profs analyze these stories and more. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, Sunday night at 6 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Support for our programs comes from you and the Museum of Printing in Haverhill, preserving the history of graphic communication from typewriters and presses to computers and copiers. Their expanded exhibit of rare and historic Bibles is now on view. More at museumofprinting.org. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're broadcasting live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back at the library on Tuesday. Billy Starr, founder of the Pan Mass Challenge, which is about to reach an incredible milestone this year. Trenny Casey, Christopher Muther, talk about him in a minute, and John King. We're joined now at the library desk by Boston Globe Vice columnist, podcaster of Love Letters fame, Meredith Goldstein. In a couple of minutes, speaking of Christopher Muther, we're going to learn more about Christopher Muther's personal life than Christopher Muther knows about his personal life. Right. Meredith, it's great to see you.
Nice to be here.
So this was a great letter, because I think this probably happens a lot, Meredith, where somebody goes out and they're having a beer and the bartender is really kind and charming and good looking, and suddenly they've fallen in love. This happened to one of your letter writers.
It's actually happened to a number of letter writers, where I get letters from people who say they have feelings for a bartender and they want to approach the bartender and they really feel like the vibes are there. And I have to remind all of these people that perhaps the vibes are there because the person is providing a service and at work and in hospitality. And, you know, I go back and forth between saying like, oh, like perhaps this person does want to be hit on, you know, behind the bar, but most likely they're being kind and doing their job. So, you know.
And get tips.
And they don't want to be harassed at work. So, you know, I always say to people, like, if this is something you're really feeling there, like really kind ways to ask without putting someone on the spot. You know, if you must, a note can be left. Like, really making sure a person is safe. And but most likely, you don't want to be trying to pick people up while they're working.
Okay, so you are such a nice person. It is pathetic. Let me just say, here's this guy. Tell me.
This letter writer, I have to say, represents the kind of letter writer that is not reading the room.
Exactly.
In a massive way.
Okay, but let's explain. He's not reading the room. So the guy says to the woman on a number of occasions, I believe, how about going out for a drink or something small, correct?
He tries it.
And what does she say to that?
She comes up, she very politely rejects him, but also coming up with reasons, like, you know, it's like, you know, when you blame somebody else, like the dog ate my homework. It's a little bit, she's saying, oh, you know what, I'm not allowed. There's you know, my boss doesn't want me. She's coming up with all these professional reasons why this is like there's a meeting after work vibes I can't miss. She is telling him in every way she can, I am not interested, and he is not picking up the signals. And the nicest way I can read this, the most generous way, is that there's no malice behind the letter writer's actions, but that he just isn't getting the hint.
Right, and so much doesn't get the hint that after he asks her for small connections and she politely refuses, his question is, well, maybe I should invite her on a big trip instead.
A romantic
he's
trip.
like, I'll see you and raise you 7.
Oh my God.
And I think, I can imagine how difficult it is as someone who works in hospitality, someone who's a bartender, to just say, no, I don't want to. Because there's, safety issues that, but he is taking every maybe or, it's not up to me as, well, maybe there's a chance.
So what'd you tell the guy?
I said, stop doing that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, I would love to. I should really do a whole column talking to bartenders and people who work in restaurants and hospitality. Is there any appropriate way to do this? How should anyone approach you? I remember when I was in my 20s, my roommate leaving a number on a check. Right? Like, I don't even know if that could happen anymore. We're paying everything electronically and everything. But it's like, hey, here's who I am. You can tell. You can
Wait, you
contact
did
me.
this?
Oh, I didn't do this. Are you kidding me? I'm an absolute coward. This was my best friend in my 20s. She would, the bartender's cute. She'd leave a little note on that. And then it was up to him to call.
Well, isn't the simplest thing, even if it's a lie, because it's a kind lie, to say, maybe it's not a lie. My policy is I just don't date customers.
Or you could just say
why
you have
can't
a
you say that?
boyfriend.
I mean,
Why don't you say
here's
that?
the thing. Even now, the three of us are coming up with all of these lies, right? I have a boyfriend, I have all this stuff, where you can be found, it can be... I have learned, it has taken me so long to learn that you're just allowed to say, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And
that's tough.
That's not. It's really hard.
It's really hard.
I say this, and I don't have an easy time just saying no in my life to things I don't want to do. But you really don't need to be well, if only I didn't
totally
have
right.
a
You
doctor's
really are.
appointment and because at some point you're not going to have a doctor's appointment, and maybe you don't have a.
Well, I
boyfriend.
actually have a lot of doctor's
I
appointments,
do
so
too,
that's
actually.
actually
well
not
for
a
you.
problem in my case. We're talking to Meredith Goldstein from the... By the way, did we show you this once before? This is not made for you. Did you see this?
I have heard about the...
What is on this stapler here?
The stapler says Meredith Vieira.
Who is she again?
So Meredith Vieira is not me.
It's not you, no.
Meredith Vieira is a broadcaster who has my first name, but...
What's it got to do with you then?
Well, because sometimes Marjorie
Sometimes
mixes
she
up
does.
my last name.
I know. Listen, I tell
She's
you.
only known you for 20
I tell you,
years.
that's
It's not
why
that big
I
a
have,
deal. Really.
I have empathy for Joe Biden because calling people by the wrong names is one of my specialties. I've done it for years.
If he had called someone Meredith Vieira last night, I would have had a converging of every part of my life.
So this is another one. Sometimes I love these letters because I love your responses. I love the readers' responses because readers are much meaner than you most of the time. But this is someone who said she's mad because she wants to get her boyfriend's friends' contact information.
Yes, this is a letter writer who wrote in saying, I'm seeing someone, I like them, I would like the contact information of his friends. I have a little bit more empathy. I have no empathy for that. I do not think this is okay. However, I'm a very nervous, worried person. And I like to know where all of my loved ones are at all times. This is not to control them, at least I think not. I am becoming my late grandma Lorraine, who was like, call me when you get home. Call me when you drive there. And I'm like, maybe you should, no. And so I can understand the impulse to want to know how to reach someone. This I thought was weird because the letter writer has been dating this guy for months. And this is not their kid. This is not their parent. You don't need to know everybody's contact information in case of an emergency.
But wait a second, also when Grandma Lorraine wanted you to call in,
yes,
there was not the ability to be in touch with someone 24/7. Who is uncontactable where you need their friends' contact information to check them out?
It's very true. And what it said to me possibly was this person is unhappy with the cadence of conversation with their significant other and perhaps wants more. If you're not responding back to me in 30 seconds, I'm going to need to know where you are. So most of the commenters too said to this letter writer, you need to take a beat and figure out what the real problem here is. Why do you need this? What do you feel unsafe about? Do you not feel communicated with enough? I do remember after my grandma Lorraine died, my grandpa, who was still alive, said, do I have to make you call? Do I have to call you? And I was like, I think we don't have to anymore, but just assume I'm fine unless you get a call.
Meredith, I'm sure I've asked you this before, but when you give advice to someone, what percentage of the time does the advice get back to you to say, I either reject that or I followed it and here was the outcome?
So, probably like 20%.
And what generally is, can you characterize them?
Usually it's like there's like
lot.
option A, option B, and then some third weird thing, and that is often what has happened, right? Where it's like, I'll find out that some totally other factor, maybe with this bartender person, she finally said, please leave me alone. Often feelings change, someone else intervenes, or they knew what they were going to do the whole time. That they were like, you know what, you said it, I knew it, or I didn't do what you said because I knew I wasn't going to do that. So I sometimes really ask people, like, let me know. We had a new one this week about a person who is only attracted to their significant other from the side view. And I was thinking about like
from the side
view, not the front view. And this brings up a lot of guilt for this letter writer. And I was like, I want to know what happens here. I mean, my thought is if you can't love someone if you're looking at them.
That's a problem.
If you have to sort of have this sort of weird conversation, it's probably not going to work out.
Hold on. So what was better about the side view than the front view? Was it they liked the profile, but they didn't like the full cheek thing?
Yeah, it was the first time I got a letter saying I liked his profile, and they didn't mean like profile on Match.com. They meant like the
his
profile of their face. And it made me really look at some of the celebrities I've always found attractive, and I'm like looking at profile pictures, I'm like, I don't really know, I'm looking at my own profile. But especially in a Zoom culture, we're so used to only having this view of the front. That is, it was actually such an odd letter, but I just thought, I'm not entirely convinced this person's attracted to their significant other.
I would say you're probably right. So can we talk? Christopher Muther is here quite regularly.
Yes.
I know I speak for Marjorie. We don't like Christopher Muther. We love Christopher Muther.
Everyone loves Christopher Muther.
And he's the travel writer for The Globe, who's one of the smartest, funniest people I've ever met in my whole life. Brilliant writer. I thought I knew him a little bit. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Try to listen to your podcast. Tell us a little bit.
So I've known Chris for 20 years now, and I thought I knew him. And when I started working at the Globe, Chris was married. And I was younger. The other thing about Chris is he has remained the same age for decades now. It's very weird. But
he's young looking.
He's quite young
really
looking.
young.
And he had a husband, and I was younger, and I was like, he has this perfect life. They're double income, no children, and they have cool furniture. And he would eventually go on to get a divorce. And it was really, I didn't even know him that well, but I was so upset because, when you make a narrative about somebody else, he's in the perfect marriage, right? And what we learned in this podcast episode is that he really wound up finding himself after this divorce. And part of the way he found himself was that he traveled the world. He became the Boston Globe's travel writer. And there are all these movies about Under the Tuscan Sun, Eat, Pray, Love, where a woman goes off and finds herself. And I just thought this is an interesting story too, because Chris found his now partner, and that's when he really began to figure out who he was through travel, through other experiences as well. But having to travel alone taught him so much about who he actually was.
And so there was it was the marriage and a long-term relationship, and then Kyle. It was Kyle next? Kyle, which was a 2-year thing.
Yeah.
I think it was Kyle. Kyle was
Josh
the 2-year
is the
deal.
first husband. Kyle is these are, by the way, fake names, except for the one we used for the current part.
Okay, so here is a clip of this fabulous podcast with Christopher Muther, travel writer at the Globe, on Meredith's Love Letters podcast, where he got vulnerable about being dumped. He was dumped after this 2-year relationship with Kyle. Here it is.
Even before the breakup, one of the people who Kyle had a gentleman's intermission with,
what a line,
was very fit. And I thought, this is happening because I'm fat. So I basically stopped eating.
Oh, God.
And I just kept going to the gym. Actually, during this time, I started going to the gym a lot. I didn't eat anything. Meanwhile, I decided to punish myself by calling it my summer of abstinence.
By the way, I hope people don't think we were cruel when we laughed. We were laughing at his expression, gentleman's intermission, is one of the great lines
I've never
ever,
heard
nor
that
had
before.
Yes. So I think the interesting thing is here he has this long marriage, and then he has in comparison, a short relationship that ends, and he is broken by it. And I think that happens a lot. Where
didn't you say first time he was ever on the dumped end? Wasn't it?
The first time he'd ever been dumped,
yeah.
because he had met his first husband so young.
Yeah.
And the first time you get dumped, it's like, your world is over. And so he's experiencing this as an older person, right? And was a mess. And as you can tell, he had no sense of even what he looked like. It took him a long time to be really comfortable in his own skin. And luckily that happened, and he now is married to someone.
So what's the value?
A doctor. He's married to a doctor.
He's a lovely doctor.
Well, who's a wonderful
doctor?
person.
Yeah.
But what's the take, other than the fabulous story about somebody who most people know at arm's length, what's the takeaway? What's the value of that podcast for the consumer?
I think, one, if you love reading Chris, you're going to love this. Two, for entertainment and feeling like now he's your new best friend. Two, I think travel is important. And he says, like, you don't have to have $1 zillion and go to all the far off places he goes. Like, he's like, go to a movie far away by yourself. The way when you're somewhere new without being able to rest on someone else to help you, he just became a more confident person. He became someone who figured out what he did in different situations. And I think the travel part of this is beautiful, and it's like trips big and small, and the way he talks about it, it's like you can tell that in his writing anyway, how much he's appreciating being there, but he's really, tuned in to who he is and who everybody else is when he's away.
Well, it felt so bad because this Kyle dumped him right before they were going to go to St. Bart's.
So they're about
for this wonderful vacation.
They're about to go to St. Bart's for the most romantic vacation ever. He gets dumped. He goes alone, and he's sitting there with a cat. And by the way,
he loves cats. By the way,
if you're Chris Muther, being with a cat is not a bad date. But he it's such a raw and beautiful episode. And I love to talk to friends because I'm always shocked on my podcast that I don't know them as well as I think I do.
Have you spoken to him since this came out?
Yes.
How's he feel? I mean, it is really intimate. But how does he feel about
he's embarrassed.
how honest he was?
I think he's comfortable, but I also think he got a lot of positive attention from listeners, and I think he can't take a compliment. So, but please give him as many as you can the next time you see him.
It's great. He's great, and it's great. It's a great podcast.
The other one I want to talk to you about, the bad juju when it comes to love. You get a lot of these letters from people who are trying so hard, and somehow it just hasn't worked for them.
Yeah.
And they're so insecure. This person says, I'm funny, cute, romantic, and it would be lucky to have me, and then they can't get going.
Yeah, and we tell people like, oh, it'll happen when you're not trying. It'll happen when you are trying. And you can be doing all the right things, and it still might not happen. And it might not happen for years, and then it might happen shortly. So
never.
Or never. And if you watch TV or you see this happen easily for people. So this letter writer wrote in and started thinking about horoscopes and angel numbers and all of the looking into the stars, which I like to read my horoscope, but I don't like fully. I'm not a horoscope person,
right.
But I said, maybe within reason, don't, or find a person who also loves horoscopes. That's a shared connection.
So, all right. What do you do? I think on dating sites too, so much of it is how you look, or what your job is, or
how you allegedly look.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's as much fooling as people think.
There's not?
Is there?
I think it's hard. I mean, it can only go so far, right? So
because you got to get together with them eventually.
And these days, you can do a FaceTime.
Yeah.
There is a lot of fooling, but I think once again, the minute you're on an actual call or in person, you're like, oh, you no longer look blurry and face-tuned.
I mean, there are some people that it's just not going to happen for.
Yeah. Well, and also, I think I will not say it happens when you're not looking, because that's not true. But I do think it sometimes is more likely to happen when you're like psyched about your life, because you're just giving off vibes.
What did you mean by that? For some people, it's not going to happen.
Well, I just think that there are people, and we all know them in our lives, who just have a lot going for them. I think more women than men, because there seem to be, to me, more neat women than neat men. I mean, that's not very fair of me to say, but that just the right person hasn't come along.
And I think
they live perfectly good lives. I'm not saying it's some American tragedy or anything.
No. And if anything, I think these days you have so many more people, and yes, a lot of them are women, saying, wow, I have an incredibly full life without a fully committed partnership, and I can have all my needs met in a different kind of way.
Right.
So, but yeah, I never want to say to anybody, oh, you'll definitely find a soulmate, because what does that even mean? I mean, you might find 5. That's great.
Didn't you? Is it the guy that Marjorie's talking about right now? Is that the one to which you said just keep try? You got to try.
Yeah.
So for someone who is incredibly shy and inhibited, And the first step is the most difficult step. What is the least intimidating first step, according to Meredith Goldstein?
I think that going to events and getting used to socialization that doesn't have the romantic layer can really help. We had one podcast episode about a woman who took a zillion classes because she wanted to meet a guy. Like volleyball, like all these different, she's doing all these things she doesn't even care about, right? And she's painting, and she kept saying every pottery class was like all other single women. But she wound up meeting her husband while skiing. And she said, you know what, had I not taken all those classes, I wouldn't have got alone, by the way, to speak to Chris Muther's point. I wouldn't have walked up to this man skiing who had just fallen down. I wouldn't have done it. And so I think
that's a great story. He fell on the slope and she came to his aid?
He was doing a cool thing, or so he thought. So, but her thought was, I can go up to him and say, wow, like what a tumble, which she would have just kept that to herself. So I do think that, especially after the last few years, we're like all weird about socialization and we all feel awkward. And so just getting used to that. And there are absolutely groups in Boston that are just about gathering.
Well, you did that podcast a few years ago about the guy that you had a crush on all through college and sat in front of you or something. You never spoke to him.
Never spoke to him.
And then 30 years later, you called him on the phone.
His name is Matt Dorfman. You can Google him.
Yeah, that was
he was
a great
an incredible
podcast.
sport. I talked to him, telling him I had this. He's married, lovely guy, an artist, but. When he heard I had such a crush on him, he was like, I was just sitting there. I would have happily talked to you.
Yeah, but that's, you let people get away.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
And I think people do that all the time, and there's a lot of regret going on.
Yeah, it's really,
So wait, before you go away, there are a lot of Matt Dorfmans, I assume. So how do I make sure that
he is a wonderful illustrator. He's a
I got him. Okay.
A New York Times. It's so funny because I thought I can't talk to him. I'm a dorky journalism student. He'd never be into me. He's an artist, and now he works for the New York Times.
There you go.
We're both journalism geeks, but we're both happily
engaged,
leading separate. But it's you never know. Just say hi.
Just say hi.
Okay.
Meredith, it's great to see you.
Great to see you.
Be well, Meredith Goldstein.
Meredith Goldstein, thank you very much. We've been speaking. That's not Meredith. That's Andy Anatko. We have to turn the page here, Marjorie.
We spoke to him too.
Yeah, we spoke to him too, but that was before. We've been speaking with Meredith Goldstein, author of the Love Letters column and the podcast of the same name. I love your podcast. We didn't get to talk about the power of the story. We'll do that next time. Meredith Goldstein is from the Boston Globe, and you get the Love Letters column and the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Up next, we'll open the lines and ask you about a potential return of the happy hour to Boston. Can we handle the fun this time? You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Can an AI chatbot expand the imagination of humans? Supporters say writers could draw inspiration from AI. Critics disagree, saying it makes art less diverse. So scientists asked people to come up with stories, with and without a chatbot's help.
My heart is racing as the door opens. There, in front of us, is an alien.
The results of an AI creative writing challenge on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and the Cape Playhouse in Dennis Village with Beautiful, the Carole King musical. The inspiring story of Carole King's journey from teenage songwriter to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Tickets at capeplayhouse.com. And Maine Maritime Museum in Bath, presenting Up to Camp, their newest exhibit celebrating Maine's sporting and leisure traditions. MaineMaritimeMuseum.org.
I'm Nicole Garcia, producer for BPR, and you're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy. Boston's nightlife scene may just get a bit more pleasurable. If the state legislature can actually do anything before their 5-month vacation, the House unanimously approved a measure to create 205 more liquor licenses here. And now the Senate is eyeing a return to happy hour, something we haven't had in the state since 1984. When it was first banned 40 years ago, people weren't happy about it. Freedom was being taken away, they argued, in Boston of all places. Now it feels like something we've all just gotten used to, but would you like to see it come back? So if you're a restaurateur, for example, are you eager for the extra foot traffic happy hour would bring, or do you say, I don't want the obligation or the cost? And in the age of ride shares, because the primary argument Michael Dukakis made at the time was the dangers, which are real, of drunk driving. In the age of ride shares, do you think concerns over drunk driving are different now? And finally, if you had to choose, you can only have one. Happy hour was cheap food, like those $1 oysters we talked about the other day, or cheap drinks. Which would you choose? The number is 877-301-8097. We know if it were cheap drinks or cheap food, we know what you'd choose. Is that correct?
Cheap food.
No, you would not.
I would. I think when I used to go to happy hours when I was a kid, it was great because they usually had buffets of hors d'oeuvres, and it was an all-you-can-eat situation. You didn't have to pay for the food as long as you were sitting there drinking.
That's because the drinks, we had to pay for the drinks.
That's right. So I think it was a wonderful way when you were a little, when you're a little bit, you don't have that much cash going on. It's a great way to get a free dinner, basically.
Let me ask you, be clear, you would prefer cheap food, appetizers, to cheap drinks?
Yes, I would.
You?
Well, now I wouldn't be so worried about that. I wouldn't be stuffing myself like it. But when I was, 25 and you're going out.
It was like dinner.
Exactly.
Okay, I'd take the
Parker
food
House,
without
the
a
Parker
doubt.
House. Remember the Parker House it's still there up
Do
on
I remember the Parker House? Yeah, I don't
House.
think it's come down yet.
They had a great happy hour at that place. I remember going there all the time.
But again, that was a combo. You got the free food because you were paying for the drinks, even though they're reduced. And you'd still take the food if in 2024 it was either cheap food, not free food, or cheap liquor, you'd take the cheap food.
You're not the only one, Jim, who likes free food.
No, I understand that. I love free food, but you will also, you like the other thing too. I know you get upset when you're a good drinker.
Because of course you're casting aspersions on the Irish, Jim, because I'm Irish.
Maybe I am.
And the other thing is, because you have 2 sips and you can't go on.
Well, I have a low
most
tolerance for alcohol.
Can get through a cocktail without being on their behind. You know what I mean? And you think it's amazing when somebody can actually do that.
So look at what Zoe, our coworker, wrote. So it's not just me. 2-for-1 dirty martinis would be a disaster for Marjorie and me.
Exactly.
For you too?
Oh, are you kidding?
I don't think so.
Halfway through a martini, I'm
really?
feeling absolutely.
Are you being defensive about this?
No, you just make up all these stories. He makes up these stories about me all the time. My friends say, "Who's he talking about?"
Well, before we get to the calls, you could probably drink me under the table. Is that a safe assumption?
As I've said to you, Jim, it's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah.
You are 6'5".
I am 6'5".
Right? I don't know how much you weigh. I won't ask. But the
less
idea
than Donald Trump.
that you can only drink half a beer before becoming intoxicated, I would say that's rather odd.
I had 2/3 of a beer the other day. Actually,
of a beer. Okay. Odd. I can drink half a martini and I've got a buzz on.
Okay,
but
so
that's economical because if you have one martini, you get a buzz on there and you're set for the night.
Okay, 877-301-8970. By the way, let's be clear. It's not clear this happy hour thing is happening because the clock's running out. We have no idea what's going on in Beacon Hill. They go home on July 31st, even though they were allegedly working really hard with their constituents after that. We want to know, how do you feel about it coming back? And also the additional question about the food at low cost versus, which a lot of restaurants are doing, which obviously wasn't banned, versus alcohol at low cost. 877-301-8970.
Elle from West Roxbury is right with me. She said this person would go for the cheap, I don't know if it's a man or woman, would go for the cheap drinks. But she points out that friends can share a plate of nachos or apps or whatever and get less expensive drinks. But a pro tip, says Elle, you should definitely order either beer or wine or a can of something because when the drinks are cheap, the bar usually skimps on the liquor. And that's a good point. You could have a very much watered down cocktail.
Very good
Matt
point.
from New Bedford, what do you think, Matt?
Hey, Matt.
Marjorie, I agree. You could totally outdrink Jim any day of the week.
Yeah, I could. It's not saying much.
I mean, it is true. It is true. Go ahead, Matt.
So I'm calling from the beer industry. I work for a beer distributor here in Massachusetts. And coming from New York, it was really good for the local beer market in the state. And a lot of restaurants post-COVID did really well with it. Just having something that was like a post-work drink that wasn't super expensive, but like something that would just like take the edge off the miserable day that you just had.
Yeah, but from Matt, from the business's perspective, is this a loss leader kind of thing where they sell a drink and don't make a profit, but the hope is someone drinks more and buys a lot of food?
Well, I think it does two things. You buy food, which makes your check go up, And then on two, it's a volume game. You sell more volume into the store because there is a set of hours that your volume numbers will go up.
Well, Matt, my understanding, and we had an interview we're going to play in a few minutes with Shirley Young about this earlier this morning. The restaurant community is split, and I think even formally they may be opposed to this. What's the primary objective in the restaurant world from those who are not crazy about it?
I think you have to go deeper into that and look at whether it's a restaurant or a bar. From a bar perspective, it's a great thing. If you're a bar with food, it's a great thing. If you're a restaurant in the North End, yeah, it's probably not for you. And hopefully that, some people will be able to take advantage of this, and then some people will say, hey, I don't want this for my business, and opt out of it.
Well, that's a very good point. It is not a mandatory thing. Matt, a beer salesman as you are, thank you very much for the call. 877-301-8970.
There's a friend of ours, Jim, Rachel from Silent Spring.
Oh, Rachel, hi.
And she says she's totally with me. When my friend and I were juniors in college, we drove across the country and pretty much ate all of our meals in bars and shared the drink. Yeah, that's
well, my best friend in law school, as I've told you before, he and I, essentially almost every night we ever went out, we went to an all-you-can-eat place.
Absolutely.
And quite regularly, we were asked to leave. And this is true. There's a place called, I've told the story before, but it's worth retelling. This guy's name was Jake Smith, and he, I told you, the first day I showed up at law school, I walk into the library. There's a guy in overalls, hair down to his waist, and bare feet, and that would be Jake.
Oh, good.
It's rather odd at NYU, there in Washington Square. I can't tell you how many times we went to a place called Beef and Brew, Steak and Beer, where
they're famous.
Where, on my honor, the general manager or the person in charge would say, I'll make a deal with you. If you two leave now, forget the check. Because this guy could drink and eat more food and consume more liquid than anybody ever met. So that was Jake Smith.
So
He's still
speaking
around,
of New York City, Texture says that happy hour in New York City is big business, but this person walks by bars in Boston that are dead between 5 and 7. Happy hour would really be a boon for business. And that's one of the reasons, is the thinking that we're kind of a dull city, never mind between 5 and 7, things shut down at like 9:30 at night.
Well, that's what the guy from the Cape, who's the primary sponsor, right? Julian Sear, the state senator, isn't that his primary thing?
Yeah.
Is that I think his line was, they're going to stay more and play more, which is the argument. But again, it's odd that a lot of restaurateurs, as we said to Matt a minute ago, aren't crazy about the idea. Margaret in Boston, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Hey there.
Hi.
Hi.
I was in my 20s when they changed away from happy hour rules. And now I go to Florida, and I really enjoy happy hour, but not the 2-for-1 drink specials. Those got us in trouble as young people.
Yeah.
A reduced price drink, maybe a special app that gathers some like-minded deeply mixing and mingling, and I think Boston area could use some of that safely.
Margaret, thank you for the call. We have a bad connection there. We had to let you go. How do you feel about, I, by the way, subscribe to the notion. We learned a lot about drunk driving in our earlier radio careers with a wonderful man whose granddaughter was killed by a drunk driver and then became an advocate for changing law, which he succeeded at as a citizen lobbyist. Her name was Melanie Powell. It's an incredible story of a grandfather's love for a kid. But do you think ride shares have created a different world or not? I do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that drunk driving used to be a joke. People would joke about how they drove back from the bar. And, I was thinking that recent Karen Reed murder trial, talking about having 9 drinks in 2 hours or 7 drinks in 2 hours. That is a lot of liquor, and then driving. Which argues against the rideshare notion that I'm advancing here. Well, I think not everybody does it, but I certainly know with my own children, when they were going out after they were eligible to go out drinking, everybody was doing Uber and Lyft, because otherwise you have to have a designated driver.
That's true.
And it's not really fun to watch all your friends, throwing back the booze and you're sitting there totally sober. Anybody who's pregnant knows, if you are someone that drinks or you're someone that doesn't drink because you've just given it up, watching people around you get drunk is when you're sober it's not necessarily the best way to spend the evening. So I think it's made a big difference, and I think people take it seriously now. It's not a joke. Nobody says,
You mean driving while after you've had...
nobody says anymore, I just really tied one on.
I agree.
Weaving all over the road on the way back. I mean, you hear stories from years ago about people that were weaving all over the road and thought it was funny to tell everybody about it. Nobody does that anymore.
So would you go to a bar in Boston that's not doing terribly well, that you wouldn't have otherwise gone to with a friend or friends, because if it turns out the drinks were half price?
Well, I think, to me, happy hour is about being young and broke. That's what I think it's about. It's you can get something for free, and you can usually get, I don't know how many places do the Parker House used to do. Somebody said Maison Robert, that restaurant that was right in the old City Hall in Boston, had a great happy hour. I never was at that one. But I don't know if they still would do the same thing with the free food. They might charge you for it. But you can still get a bunch of appetizers.
Well, except didn't we read the other day, I don't know if I have the number right from the Globe story, didn't we read that like 25 restaurants were doing the dollar oyster thing and losing money on it, by the way. Speaking of loss leaders, to get you in the door.
Nachos can fill you up, Jim.
What?
Nachos can fill you up.
By the way, nachos, how great. I mean, nachos unbelievable.
Yes, nachos are great.
And nachos were free somewhere?
Sour cream.
Where were they free?
I've never had them free, but I had, as I said, very, very spare ribs, pigs and blankets.
Did you ever go to Fajitas and Ritas that announced it's closing after 30-some years?
That was a wonderful place.
It was a great place.
They had great margaritas there.
They did indeed.
Anthony from,
look who's on.
Josiah from Provincetown.
Is this our Josiah?
Yes, I think so.
Oh, it is. Yep.
Hey, how are you, Josiah? So a good friend of ours
I'm doing great.
His claim to fame, other than being a fabulous person, which we learned in later years, I always have to introduce you this way, Josiah, my apologies, is the day that Brian McGrory was our guest, and he and I were trashing the story of the guy in Provincetown who'd been not swallowed, but in the mouth of the whale. Yeah. We said something like, well, if it's true, where's the driver of the boat? And minutes later, the driver of the boat called, which would be Josiah. So it's great to talk to you, Josiah. What's up?
Yeah. Well, thanks to David Abel for helping us break that story properly.
But stop there. Wait. David Abel, formerly of the Globe, who did this film. What's the name of the film, Josiah? In the Whale?
It's called In the Whale, but he's got 3 films, though. His Inundation District is huge. The first one about the right whales and the lobster buoys, that thing, too.
Oh,
he's
yes.
Great. David Abel, A-B-E-L. He's been on with us about every movie. Check it out. How are you, Josiah?
Good. I'm just, as a dyed-in-the-wool, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but a mayhole, I don't know what you call it, really, on radio. I don't think you can handle happy hour. I really don't.
Why?
I don't think so, It's like nips, too, Big, smaller the bottle, bigger the problem. Can't incentivize people to get hammered at 5 p.m. Just not a good idea.
Well, a lot of people, I'm getting a lot of texts from people who think that too, and they're very worried about people over drinking and alcoholism and all that kind of stuff.
Don't go away. How do people feel? I mean, you, for those who don't know, Josiah, his family, your family have been on the Cape forever there. How do people in Provincetown, the business owners, feel about it? I mean, by the way, Julian Sear.
I haven't really heard about it.
Julian Sear, who's the Cape senator, is the one who's the champion of this. But go ahead.
I mean, I haven't heard a din about it. I haven't heard about it one way or another. I'm sure people think it's like some kind of slight economic advantage, but I don't know. If there was a bunch of wasted people at, 5 or 6 p.m. running around Provincetown, it would probably be an issue.
Hey, Josiah, it's great to hear from you. I'll see you in August. It's great to hear your voice. Thanks so much for calling in.
Here's a texter. There are plenty of drunk, arrogant, uncouth individuals arguing and fighting in bars, paying full price. This is a very bad idea, even in the days of Uber and Lyft. So
how do you feel about this? Did we say this already? I don't think so.
About happy hours?
Yeah. Would you vote to bring it back?
I would.
Because of your concern about businesses?
Because, obviously alcoholism is a serious problem. You don't want anybody to be driving drunk, but most people can drink like a normal person, and I don't think we want to make legislation from the point of
the worst behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, also, again, I can't remember. We talked to Shirley this morning. You'll hear it in about 5 minutes. But I think part of the reason was not just for the businesses. I think Senator Sears' position was a lot of young people are leaving the state. And one of the reasons they're leaving the state is because it's not open enough and it's not as much fun as their other competing cities are. And theoretically, that would raise the fun quotient. I don't know.
We have a question, Jim. You just mentioned your friend from law school.
Yeah. Jake Smith.
Someone was surprised. They said, Jim has a friend?
No, I also said Josiah was a friend. So there were 2 in one little say. It's shocking, isn't it?
It's
I wasn't even using the term loosely, by the way. Should we try to squeeze one more call in?
Sure,
Because this person's calling from...
Nicole from Fall River.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi, how are ya?
We're great.
What do you think?
Hey, so I'm a bartender from Marguerite's hometown of Fall River.
Oh,
and
gosh.
I think it's a terrible idea. I think what you're doing is you're inviting in a class of people who generally aren't going to be buying full-price drinks or full-price food in your restaurant. You're encouraging people to drink heavily at rush hour while people are driving home. You don't need to give people much incentive to drink. That's for sure.
Nicole, I got another question for you. We were talking before about people falling in love with the bartender. You know, they'll come in, they'll have a couple of drinks, and all of a sudden they're asking you out on dates. I'm sure that's happened to you once or twice. What do you do?
Well, Margie, I'm a happily married woman, and I've been bartending since I was 19. I'm 36 now. So at this point, I'm pretty rude to people. I just shut them down quickly. But it does happen a lot, and I feel bad for a lot of my coworkers.
Okay. I guess you can point to the wedding ring if you're married,
sort of
right?
helps,
Just say you got a husband, and he wouldn't like it one little bit. Yeah, it does happen a lot.
Hey, Nicole, we're glad you called.
Do you want to say what restaurant you work at?
I work at the Atlantic
on
Cope Street.
Okay.
Do you know it?
Say it again?
The Atlantic where?
The Atlantic.
What street?
On Cope Street, right off South Main and Farming.
Okay, I know Show Street, but I don't know that place. But I have to check it out next time in town, Nicole. I got a lot of family still down there. Thank you very much for the call.
Thanks, Nicole. Good to hear from you.
Okay, I think are we done?
Well, we have 2 minutes left. Anything else you want to say about this? Is really interesting? Like really interesting? Let's take Anthony from New York City for 30 seconds. Hi, Anthony.
Hey, Jim. How's it going?
Excellent.
Hey, Marjorie.
Hi.
Great. Love you guys. Listen to you every day at work.
Thank
Jim,
you.
I'm glad I don't share a refrigerator with you. That's all I gotta say.
You got to listen yesterday
anyway.
to know what Anthony's talking about. Go ahead.
Anyway, guys, so I work in New York City. I've been living there for a while, and I was visiting family up in Boston last weekend. And, it's like a Friday afternoon, 5 p.m., 6 p.m. The city was dead. The South End was just like no life to it. And I'm wondering, people pay all this money to live in the South End, and it's just like a ghost town after work. And so I'm just wondering, if happy hour or just more, after work specials or that kind of deal could bring a little bit more life to the city.
Anthony, that's a great call. And people are talking about Chicago so much better than we are. Philadelphia so much better than we are. We're very boring up here in Boston. Cheaper drinks might get people out of the house. In any case, we are done with this. We talked to Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Young right before the show today. A little bit about happy hour, about Beacon Hill's big ticket leisure spending. That is next. After this interview, stick around for the Culture Show, which is going to be right here at the library, right after the 2 o'clock news. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Today on The Culture Show, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review. D is for dismal. That's the grade the world's orchestra just received, a capital D on diversity. From there, it's a capital F for flop. Kevin Costner's Horizon, the multi-million-dollar multi-part Western, is bombing at the box office. And nothing says summer like the Frankie Beverly and Mays classic cookout hit, Before I Let Go. We take on that and more live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Shriners Children's Boston. Accidents happen, and when those accidents involve a burn injury of any size, Shriners Children's Boston is the place to turn for any burn. Shriners Children's Boston, the most amazing care anywhere.
North end, descend a dark stairwell, duck into the dimly lit, leather-upholstered bar at Stanza dei Sigari, where House Speaker Ron Mariano, his campaign has picked up at least $6,000 in tabs over 3 years, a place that serves no food, but where cigars cost as much as $85 a pop. The drink list runs long, and $480 pours of Remy Martin 13 are available. And he goes on to detail the wining and dining at these really high-end restaurants, $23 wedge salads at a place called Moo. And it's not just Mariano, it's other legislators that are in top leadership. So what do you think?
Well, this is a part of an incredible series from Matt Stout and Samantha Gross of our State House team. And that lead is incredible, right? I mean, you talk about, we always imagine that there's backroom deals, right? Done in smoke-filled rooms. And literally, they painted a picture of that and all paid for, not on the politician's dime, but on funds from that they've raised through their political campaigns.
Yeah,
exactly.
But there's no, we can't know who they're dining with.
Right. And so the point of the piece was two things. You don't know who they're dining with, and there's not a lot of requirements by the current laws to explain why you're doing this. There's very little accountability. Even Florida, I think they pointed out, has even more transparency on how this money is spent. And I should say that what Mariano and other leaders are doing, it's not illegal. You know, it's all within the laws. And and you can see that what Matt and Sam are trying to do is point out we need to fix the laws here.
You know, by the way, I have to say you're both being really unfair. I mean, I was looking at this, for example, the House Ways and Means chair, who is likely to be the Speaker of the House when the current Speaker leaves, Aaron Miklowitz from the North End, he only spends $740,000 wining and dining his colleagues or lobbyists, I don't know, from May of 2022 to this year. I think I have the dates.
Basically
right?
2 years.
And by the way, but what's most important is, to my knowledge, I just looked it up, he had no opposition. And these are campaign funds to, what is the line that's technically, they have to be, they can't be primarily for personal use. It has to enhance their political future. There are a million examples like this in the story, going to the most expensive restaurants. And I don't want to gloss over what you and Marjorie were just talking about. Listen to this line from their story. In other states such as Florida, as you mentioned, Shirley, even small meetings, such as the kind of dinners hosted by legislative leaders, are required to be open. Under so-called sunshine laws, members of the public there are entitled to know if two or more lawmakers are discussing policy. A former colleague of yours, who's now at BUR, Todd Wallach, started all this stuff at the Globe. When he told us that we are the least transparent state in America, the only state where every branch of government claims exemption from public records laws, and here they can spend literally millions of dollars of campaign donations to wine and dine. We don't even know who.
That's the thing. Are they with big time real estate developers?
Exactly.
Or were they with people from pharmaceutical manufacturers, all people that are trying to keep them in their pocket, which is basically so.
At least tell us, as your point, at minimum, why don't they change? Well, we know why they don't. Why don't they change the damn law so we're at least entitled to know who they're eating with or smoking cigars with?
Anybody.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what's so. I mean, frankly, I think sleazy about this.
You think so?
Yes, I do.
Even though it's legal, under current law, as Shirley said.
Don't forget, Senate President Karen Spilka has plunked down $1,800 at Urban Grape, a wonderful liquor store,
It is
by
a great
the way.
liquor store.
But that's not the point. For what she described as, quote, refreshments for late night working sessions. I love that. You know, a lot of companies, you can take people out, but you can't charge the company for booze, right? You can charge the food, you can't charge the liquor. But apparently the liquor is no problem. And again, it's not taxpayer money, as you point out. It's from their campaign funds. But do you think that's what people are thinking they're donating
Well,
to?
but here's the problem. Here's the problem. Because we're a one-party state, when you read the story, in a normal state, there'd be public outrage, and the opposition party would demand changes to the law, like at minimum you disclose who you're eating or drinking or smoking cigars with. But because there are only about 1.5 Republicans on Beacon Hill, this is going to be a one-and-done story, which is, it's really horrible.
Well, you know what? I blame our uninvolved public. I mean, people don't know who their legislators are. People don't know enough about
Marjorie, if
these
they have
kind
nobody running against them, it doesn't matter how angry the public gets. Shirley, what, I mean,
well,
go
I
ahead.
would say the other thing, what's really interesting, the story seems to indicate that a lot of the people that they're whining and dining are fellow legislators because they want to, they want to exactly, they want to own them. And I just can't. And when I was thinking about that lead in the smoke-filled cigar room, I was thinking, well, how many women are there? You know, how many women legislators are in an environment like that? You know, and so I think I'm hoping the laws will change. I'm hoping that this series, a year-long series, will spark some change in the legislature. But as you just pointed out, will they really change with this, basically one-party rules?
Well, that's the other thing, too, that's important to remember is that everything is done at the State House, and you correct me because you spent a lot of time up there, if I'm wrong, by the leadership. They decide what's going to happen.
It wasn't so much years ago. Now it is totally leadership.
We are the least effective.
You get a bill of 150 pages or 1,000 pages, and the day before you have to vote for it.
And you're supposed to read it in like half an hour.
Right.
So you cannot find out in many cases how the people you elected even vote. The leadership makes all the decisions. The bills, as you pointed out, Jim, are supposed to be read in this mad dash at the end of the session. We're now coming up to the end of the session. It's July 31st. All these important issues like housing, we don't know what's going on with these things. I mean, it's really.
I have to make a disclosure before we leave this topic.
What?
I have been, not on campaign funds, I was taken by a former colleague of ours at our commercial radio station to Stanza de Cigari. I have been to the cigar bar.
You have been there.
I have. And let me tell you, your question, the night I was there, it's anecdotal, there were not a lot of women there. In fact, there were no women there. And I have to say, well, I'm not a cigar kind of guy. It's quite something.
Wait a minute,
I
Jim.
should say.
You descended the dark stairwell and ducked into the dimly lit leather upholstered bar?
I can say, by the way, it's nothing wrong. It's nothing. Our former colleague Joe from Boston took me one night, and it was unbelievable, but not on campaign funds.
Marjorie, we have a field trip. Marjorie,
I think we do.
Yeah,
I think we should go in there and see the people we might recognize that have been elected to office in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Let's do that. All right, we got a date.
I mean,
okay, but read this piece, by the way. This again, Matt Stout and who's the
Samantha Gross.
Samantha Gross. Just really great reporting.
Have you been to the Moo restaurant?
Moo is fabulous.
Oh yeah, the Moo is right down the street from the. It's like a block away from the State House. I've been to the Moo. I've been to the Moo with legislative people. It's a legislative business leader hangout.
Yeah, nobody's going to the Olive Garden here, right? They're not going.
Wait a second. Let's just clarify the record so that people don't get bent out of shape. You said you've been there with legislators. I assume not at their expense.
No. I mean, I think I had coffee.
Okay. By the way, the food's fabulous. It's a great place.
It
but it's
is.
really
It is
expensive.
a great steakhouse. Hey, these legislators go first class all the way.
Okay,
Top drawer.
speaking of drinking and eating, this economic development bill, I was not aware of this till reading another story in the Globe. At least one of the versions, is it the Senate version, one of the versions that may be voted on before they disappear on July 31st, includes the restoration of happy hour, sort of the biannual discussion about whether or not in the era of ride share, it's safe to go back to happy hour. How much support is there for this in the restaurant industry, Shirley?
The restaurant industry does not support this, but
Really?
the Senate took a vote this time yesterday, and it is passed the Senate, and so now it's on to the House to be reconciled with the House. Now, I don't think the House is happy about happy hour, and so, but I don't know. It was a little, I've been following liquor licenses. This came as a surprise to me too, and that the Senate would introduce a resolution to allow municipalities to opt into happy hour. I don't think we've had it since the 80s.
Yeah, Dukakis. He's the one who got rid of it.
Dukakis, yeah. And there was an effort maybe last year or a couple of years ago. It didn't go very far. So here's yet another attempt. Now, this is Senator Sear, and
Cape, yeah.
there was a bill. It didn't go anywhere, so he inserted it into the economic development bill, and it's moving along to the next stage. I also wrote about, there was something else also in the economic development bill regarding liquor licenses. Did you know you have to be a U.S. citizen in order to hold a liquor license?
I did not read this.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that appears to have passed as well, to drop the requirement. I mean, think about the number of immigrants who are permanent residents, who are in the restaurant business, who want to grow their business with their liquor license, and they cannot apply for one. They cannot hold the license. And so I'm hoping that this will, again, I don't think this has been brought up in the House. It's two senators, Patrick O'Connor, Republican from Weymouth, Lydia Edwards, Democrat from Boston. They have come together to support a bill, and now this measure has been put into the economic development bill and is moving on to the next stage.
People may be surprised when they heard you say that restaurant owners, not monolithically, but majority, don't want a happy hour. Is that because they're concerned about liability under statute?
It's the cost. I think it's the cost. I think it's the headache.
You lose money.
I think it's the headache of it, and so. But this is
well,
like
they lose money, Marjorie, but it's supposed to be a loss leader, is the theory.
Yeah,
right.
Gets people in. But go ahead, Shirley.
So no, I was actually surprised too. I thought the restaurant industry would support. They didn't support it last time. Of course, this was coming out of the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
They have so much going on. It's such a big labor shortage, right? And so it's just one more thing that they have to balance. I mean, though I love happy hour. When I go to California to visit relatives, when I go to, I'm like, happy hour. Let's go. And the drinks. Usually, I mean, though I don't drink that much. I'm excited about.
Well, it's the free food,
drinks,
right?
It's a discounted food.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
It's discounted food. And so, but I mean, you do see here like $1 oysters, which is our version of a happy hour. So I guess I would actually love to do a little more the economics. Like, what's better? I guess half price drinks, yes, you would lose money, but what we do here instead is $1 oysters. You lose money on the oysters. You bring people in to have full price drinks.
I'm just wondering why Julian Sear, as you mentioned, represents the Cape and the Islands. He's been pushing this for a while. So if the restaurants don't want it necessarily, what's up with him? Why is he so? Do we know why he's so adamant about this or wants it so much?
Yes, he was saying it's because Boston and Massachusetts, we're boring. We're boring to millennials. We're boring to Gen Z. They are moving out of the state, and so we got to give them something to make the nightlife a little more exciting.
Let them drink. That'll keep them here. Yeah.
But you know something? Don't you remember when you had happy hour? The great thing about happy hour was you could go, as Shirley said, and eat. You could go eat dinner, but not even pay for it because there'd be all these buffet hors d'oeuvres and heavy hors d'oeuvres and stuff. Pigs and blankets, Jim, your favorite thing.
My favorite.
You have a couple of beers and you're all set.
Shirley, one last thing about this, because you were mentioning in passing liquor licenses, and you've done great work on this. I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember if you covered this. You know what I learned the other night, and again, maybe it was included in your stuff, that the rules around liquor licenses at Massport, like at Logan, are totally different. Do you know that? My understanding.
Yes, I wrote about this.
Oh, you did? Okay. All you do is apply and you get it, right? I mean, if you're a restaurant there and you want it, You just get it because I guess the theory is that you're going to get on a plane, so you're not going to be driving anywhere. Is that what it's about?
So I actually know a lot about this.
Great.
So what's been, because the legislature has capped the number of licenses in each municipality, and it's been a big problem in Boston, right? Because we have Logan here, and think of all the restaurants that have the growing number of restaurants there, and the seaport here, and so a lot of new restaurants and bars. And so as a result, they've basically, for all, the city's run out of licenses. And so when there's no license, you have to buy it from another restaurant that's closing. And right now the price is about $600,000. So what Massport did was they said, listen, they went to the legislature, and I want to say maybe, I forgot the exact year, but it's been like 7-8 years within the last decade, maybe a little more than a decade ago. Anyways, they went and said, we're going to turn in our regular licenses to the city of Boston and just give us the right for unlimited number of licenses. So if you are a restaurant or bar that operates on Massport or at the airport, you get a license. I mean, you still have to go through the licensing board and the State Alcoholic Beverage and Control Commission. I mean, you still need to be go through the process. But basically, there is no limit on the number of licenses that can be issued on Massport on the Logan Airport. And so right now, Logan has about 47 liquor licenses, including the airline clubs. And so I think at one time we figured it out. It was almost represented like 20% of the liquor licenses in East Boston or something, or maybe it was higher than that. Maybe it was almost close to 40%. But it was a high percentage of the liquor licenses in East Boston are at Logan Airport, which is in East Boston.
Okay, Shirley Leung, we have got a lot of ballot questions coming up this fall, including the one to scrap the MCAS exam as graduation requirement, which the Teachers Association, Mass Teachers wants, and Governor Healy does not, among other people. We've also got Diana DiZoglio's effort to audit the legislature. I think the legislature's adventures at the Scar Bar in the North End, Jim, might boost the opportunity for Diana DiZoglio, to get what she wants. But what else we got cooking?
Allow rideshare drivers to unionize, legalize psychedelic mushrooms, and I think there's one question that's still being, they're trying to I think Secretary of State is trying to verify if it will be allowed to go on the ballot, because I think they just cleared it by like 136 signatures, and this is the tip wages,
yes.
the increase the minimum wage for tipped workers over the next 5 years, and so that they will be paid the full minimum wage by 2029. And I think the Mass Restaurant Association is disputing the signatures, the last batch of signatures. And I mean, I didn't realize until my colleague Matt Stout wrote this that there were so many ballot questions this fall, right? I mean, that's a lot.
You know, one thing I want to quarrel with I don't remember if Matt wrote this, who's a really good reporter, but a lot of reporters
from the Boston Herald
are disparaging, they used to be, disparagingly right. You know, these are people or organizations or unions or corporations trying to bypass the legislature, as if there's something wrong with that. Generally, I mean, there are problems where particularly very wealthy organizations try to buy a law, because history suggests overwhelmingly if you spend more on a ballot question than the other side, you're probably going to win. Not always, but in about 2/3 of cases. But the bypass line is BS. Every ballot question that changes or creates a law goes to the legislature. If the legislature doesn't want to go to the ballot, they can either pass it as it is, or can try to cut a deal with the proponents and the opponents to do something that's a reasonable compromise. Generally, these things get to the ballot, like the 3 marijuana questions over more than a decade, because the legislature doesn't have the courage to confront an issue that the public in Massachusetts cares deeply about, you know? I mean, marijuana being the best exception. Decriminalization, recreational legalization, whatever the third thing was, all 3 had to be done by the public on the ballot because the legislature were cowards, essentially.
Or they were busy.
Or the millionaire tax too. That was.
Well, that was no choice. No, but that was a constitutional amendment, and constitutional amendments ultimately have to be voted on by the public.
So, are you done with this?
I'm done with it.
Okay, so
I'm
first
really
of all,
done with
I
it.
want to congratulate you again for your wonderful Say More podcast.
This is all you talk about.
Because it's such a huge issue.
Explain what it is, the burnout.
Burnout.
Yes,
and it's particularly, I think, relevant toward women. So give us a summation before we move on to your next, what you got on the Say More coming up. Tell us what you said in the burnout thing, or what your guest said in the burnout thing.
So the last burnout episode was and we did it. We ended up doing a bonus episode. We said 5 episodes. So listen, catch up on all of them. But basically, the last one is about women. We are hardwired to say yes to everything.
We are.
And basically, that is driving us nuts. That is making us exhausted. It is preventing us from being promoted because we tend to take on at work what they call the non-promotable tasks: the organizing the retirement parties, the mentoring the summer interns. And while the men, they sit back and they take on the tasks and assignments that get them promoted. And so there needs to be a recognition that women are hardwired to say yes. Women themselves need to learn to say no. And also managers, when they look around the room and decide who to give assignments to, don't go for your female workers right away for these non-promotable tasks. Maybe go to the men first. And the reason, I mean, they've surveyed this and showed that women tend to say yes. So that's why women get asked to do some of these tasks first.
Well, I hate to criticize. You're both being unfair a second time. We have to go to the cigar bars. I mean, there are only so many hours in a day.
That's right.
If we weren't at the cigar bars, we'd probably be organizing these events.
Down the dark stairwell into the dimly lit, leather upholstered bar. But Shirley, you know what I particularly loved about this? I mean, you are a big star. You're a big time columnist at Boston Globe. You're like probably the biggest, most read column. You're a big deal at the Globe, and you got 2 kids, and you got the podcast going. You talked about your own burnout, which I really loved because I think a lot of us are afraid to admit it. And you talked about how you are organizing retirement parties.
Yes.
So why are you doing that?
Well, it's because I've been at the Globe so long.
Yeah.
I know these colleagues for a long time. I mean, I don't organize all of them, but I did organize the last 2 in our department. But hopefully no more people will be retiring. But it's okay to, I guess, you just have to be more selective,
right? You have to be more selective.
And I, for example, like the other day, my 11-year-old plays basketball, somewhat seriously. He does AAU. And,
good for him.
And I wanted to join him on now I want him to join like small group training, right? That's the next level. And one of the coaches like, well, we have an opening Wednesday night at 5:30.
There you go.
Stoughton. And I was like. In Stoughton, I was thinking, but I'm going to be in Waltham for a story, and I'll be done at like 4:30. And like, how do I get home? There's no way. But I'm so glad I said no because it took me an hour to get home. It's only 13 miles between Waltham and Milton, but it was an hour at rush hour. It's usually 30 minutes. And so I was like, I'm so glad I said no. I think if I had not done the series, I would have said yes. So I'm learning to say no more.
Okay, so you have got a podcast that just dropped now and Say More about the Karen Reed trial with Sean Cotter, the reporter who's covered it, and Joan Vanacchi, the great columnist of the Globe. So what's the theme?
It was great. So Sean's been at the courthouse at the crack of dawn, covering Karen Reed, and Joan's been writing great columns about what this means for the state police and Karen Reed, and so we had the 2 of them together in the Globe's cozy podcast studio talking about what's next for Karen Reed. I mean, it literally is a closet. The 4 of us were in there, plus my producer Anna. It's pretty tight. I was like, we need an upgrade. We need a bigger podcast studio. Anyway, so it was great because we could catch up on their insights on the trial. What's next? Because July 22nd, everybody, both sides, the defense and prosecution, they're gearing up for another court hearing on July 22nd to really determine the next phase of the trial. Karen Reed, accused of killing her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe running over, hitting him with her car in a snowstorm. The trial, after 8 weeks, the trial ended in a mistrial. And one of the things that's being hotly debated right now is that Karen Reed's lawyers have filed motions in court. They said now 4 jurors have told them that there were three charges, and 2 of the charges they actually came unanimous on, and so as a result,
that's what the lawyers are saying.
That's what the lawyers say.
Yeah.
That the most serious charge of she shouldn't be tried again on the most serious charge of second-degree murder, and so Sean was saying this is unprecedented legal territory, and Joan was saying that she doubts that that will count as a verdict because it wasn't kind of formally handed in, and she says there's case law that says that that's not really a verdict, but both of them agree that this will likely go to the SJC, and if it does, that means a new trial will be delayed by months. We're probably talking a new trial, and then there'll be appeals. So we're probably looking at the end of the year or even into next year before there's a new trial. Also, one more thing. I wondered about Chloe, the German Shepherd. Remember
that supposedly bit the arms of John O'Keefe.
And it's
been moved.
Right. And so, because I was thinking that was talked about, right? That was the defense. There was this dog in the house and it attacked O'Keefe, and then, that weakened him, and that's how he died. And the jury didn't seem to really buy into that. And I didn't realize that there was no canine DNA found on O'Keefe. And so that line of defense didn't really go very far. But Sean told us Chloe, the German Shepherd, there was actually quite a bit of testimony about Chloe, and that she has since been rehomed to Vermont.
Yeah.
So we find out the fate of Chloe.
Okay, so we're out of time, but really quickly, how long do we have to wait for the Netflix TV show on this whole thing?
Oh, that is a good thing.
Yeah,
probably. Think about a TV show. If you could do a TV show in a year or 2, that's pretty good. But there's no ending yet, right?
No ending.
There's no ending to Karen Reed.
We need a denouement. Okay, Shirley Young, great columns, great podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
See you at the cigar bar. Take care.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
Maybe not, actually.
Okay.
See you, Shirley.
We have been speaking with Shirley Young, who is a great business columnist for the Boston Globe, and she's also the host of the Say More podcast. Great stuff about burnout and great stuff about the Karen Reed trial. Okay, we are done. Thank you very much for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. You can listen to us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio, or see the baby goat that was in our studio yesterday when the video is uploaded to youtube.com/GBH News. Shows this little baby goat coming into our studio, coming in the.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Eversource, committed to helping businesses reach sustainability goals and lower their energy use through energy assessments and custom recommendations. Learn more at eversource.com. Frontline investigates every corner of the world so you can discover the stories that others can't or won't tell whenever you want. Watch Frontline on the PBS app anytime on your TV or smart device.
You can make a lasting difference to the station that keeps you informed and entertained by making a gift of support. And
his troubling debate performance last month. Various reporting signals some donors are considering holding back their campaign support if they haven't already done so. A new NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll finds the race between Biden and former President Trump continues to be statistically tied nationally, despite Biden's debate performance 2 weeks ago. NPR's Domenico Montanaro explains that how the candidates' vulnerabilities stack up is key to understanding this race.
By a 2-to-1 margin, people say it's more concerning to have a president who doesn't tell the truth compared to one who is too old to do the job. 68% say telling the truth matters more compared to just 32% who say age is a bigger factor. 2/3 say President Biden doesn't have the mental fitness to be president, but a majority also say that Trump doesn't have the character to be one either. Domenico Montanaro, NPR News, Washington.
Range from a multi-million-dollar investment in life sciences to the return of happy hours.
Senators say their plan to let cities and towns opt in to happy hour drink discounts would give restaurants a boost and help Massachusetts shed its uptight image. The legislation would also clear the way for a new professional soccer stadium in Everett. But before any of that happens, the Senate will need to iron out the differences between its bill and the version that's passed to the Massachusetts House. The House package has policies that aren't part of the Senate bill, including a move to rename the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center after the city's former mayor, Tom Menino. Katie Lannon, GBH News, 89.7.
Mr. Magoo's in Boston used to have happy hour, 10 beers for $1. Scientists at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution are seeking a federal permit to experiment in the waters off Cape Cod to see if altering the chemistry of the ocean could help the water better absorb carbon dioxide from the air. The plan, if approved, would take place this fall and disperse 6,600 gallons of sodium hydroxide into the ocean about 10 miles south of Martha's Vineyard. It would most likely be the first ocean field test of this technology in the U.S. There is opposition to the experiment, but it could go to a bigger trial next year in the Gulf of Maine. 88 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from the Public Welfare Foundation, committed to advancing a transformative approach to justice that is community-led, restorative, and racially just. Learn more at publicwelfare.org. And the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
All summer long, GBH News explores Boston's busing legacy. How has it shaped our city?
It's rare that a story like this comes around that is so deeply entrenched into the psyche of a city.
Features editor Jennifer Moore.
If your life was somehow impacted by it, we would love to hear from you. Just write into GBH News Connect at WGBH.org.
GBH News Connect at WGBH.org.
This is The Culture Show, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Jared Bowen is away. I'm joined by Culture Show co-hosts Callie Crossley and James Bennett II. It is time for our Arts and Culture Week in Review. Here's what it sounded like.
Throughout history, there have been many black and brilliantly gifted composers. So why don't we know more about them?
We're setting the record straight, and I have to say,
It's about time.
In something that will shock absolutely nobody, Horizon Part 2, the Kevin Costner sequel, was scheduled to come out on August 16th. They have now pulled it off the release calendar.
The other night, Rachel and I are in bed talking about fantasies, and I happened to describe a particular Star Wars thing.
Princess Leia in the gold bikini.
Yes!
Alec Baldwin's criminal trial is underway now in New Mexico, with opening statements wrapping up just a short time ago. Baldwin is charged with involuntary manslaughter for the deadly shooting of cinematographer Helena Hutchins on the set of Rust.
There's a scandal in the world of Major League eating. Questions are now being asked about just how many hot dogs one contestant really ate during the annual contest. Some say there is a weasel in the world of wieners.
Well, as you just heard, it is the Dead White Men's Club. A new report finds that the world of classical music has been slow to diversify its symphonic repertory. Then it's Kevin Costner's cinematic saga. He took a gamble on a sprawling passion project, putting down his own multi-millions and a house for a box office bomb. Speaking of bombs, is this summer's Barbenheimer Glicked, a Gladiator and Wicked movie mashup. Plus, as you just heard, Shaboozie's slow burning hybrid of hip-hop and country tops Billboard's country and Hot 100 charts simultaneously. Finally, Frankie Beverly and Maze's Cookout Classic. You're going to want to stick around for that before I let go. But first up, we're going to talk about this report card, which has delivered a D to the world's orchestras for being slow to diversify their repertory. Now, this will come as no surprise to comedian Roy Wood. Here he is on The Daily Show speaking about this very subject.
Today, we'll be discussing black classical music. Now, I know you might be thinking that classical music is just for old white men whose hair looks like they spent a day inside of a tornado. But black musicians have an often overlooked history of contributions in the classical music space. Take our first musician, George Bridgetower. Born in Britain in 1778, George was a young musical prodigy, driven into show business by his overbearing father, the 18th century version of Joe Jackson. Boy, you better get back in there and learn that violin.
In all seriousness, what we're talking about with this report card here is two recent reports by two different organizations, and they're using slightly different measures. One is the ICD, or the Institute for Composer Diversity. This is State University of New York at Fredonia and the University of Houston, who run this organization. And then there's a second organization called Dawn, Women in Music. And this was established over in the UK by a soprano, Gabriella Di Laccio. She maintains a database of about 5,000 women composers from medieval times to present day. Both of these groups occasionally put studies out where they take a look at the state of diversity in classical music. And in recent ones from both of them, one which was just looking at the year 2024, at 111 orchestras in 30 different countries, and the other looking over a 7-year period at almost 200 orchestras here in the U.S. They basically both come to similar conclusions, which is that in the U.S., Europe, the Americas, and Asia, we're not doing a very good job when it comes to diversity.
Right. With regard to repertory, that is what the orchestras are playing. I just, slowly became aware of this because I think if you're not an aficionado of classical music, as James is, you know some pieces. And if you go infrequently, you hear some pieces, and maybe you don't question the fact that, oh, I hear these frequently, but I don't know that I've heard from younger composers as you might in other genres. That's just normal. You hear younger, you hear from various other groups. But during the year 2020, I became aware after doing an interview with Tanya Leon, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning conductor and composer. She won for her piece called Stride, and she was a part of something called Project 19, which was put together by the New York Philharmonic. And they were specifically performing works by women composers in honor of the anniversary of the 19th Amendment. Now, Tanya Leon herself is Cuban American, so she's black. So that added another level in terms of the participation by the women composers and by the orchestra with intentionality playing these pieces in celebration of that anniversary.
Yeah, and actually Tanya Leon has a world premiere coming up at the Boston Symphony Orchestra in the 2024-25 season. But for me, it's not, I don't want to say I called it, but I called it a couple years back in 2020, you know, when we're having these really big conversations about the, you know, systemic racism that is present, like, in our institutions. How do we fix it? We got to do better. There was so much of that energy, but I was really worried that it would be a lot of lip service. And, you know, to your point about, like, you know, the Project 19 thing, that has to come, like, you just can't say, at least in my opinion, right? You just can't say, we're going to do better. You need to have a plan. It needs to be a concerted effort, right, to, you know, put different composers or musicians kind of on that docket. And, you know, I also was taking a look at Opera Philadelphia, you know, and they've been doing some, like, pretty good work in the past. And this upcoming season, I think they have The Listeners, which is a new opera by is it new? Not sure. By Missy Mazzoli. And in that opening clip, we heard Roy Wood talking about our first musician, George Bridgetower, born in 1778. But I have him beat because Joseph Boulogne was born in 1745. He was a contemporary of someone that you might know named Mozart. They lived together in Paris for a time in a giant mansion. So we don't know if they actually crossed paths, but they lived in the same house.
How big, like huge mansion?
It was a big man. Yeah, it was a duke, you know. But one of his, I think one of his only surviving operas, if not his only surviving opera, is also being performed by Opera Philadelphia this season. So,
where do we go from here? How do we improve this?
I mean, because people, I think, get accustomed to certain pieces of music and they feel like that's the canon, period, right?
Well, you know,
Well,
the thing is this, right? Orchestras are businesses, and people like familiarity. But, you know, as a business, you can also use, you know, your own kind of power, right, to encourage your audiences to experience something new or something fresh. How did those ears get so used to that music in the first place? It's because they were putting it in front. I was talking to the composer Caroline Shaw yesterday, and she made this point about how recording music is a bit different because there's a lot of rights issues that go into this, you know, copyright stuff. But I was thinking about that, and it's like, well, in the live music space, it might operate a little bit differently. Like, maybe it's up to the live musicians and those organizers to, you know, give us something a bit fresher to listen to.
All right. Well, from there to the Department of Obvious Findings. Now, this is probably going to shock folks, but there's a recent report from the New York Fed that finds that graduates with university degrees in majors in the arts are indeed the most likely right now to find themselves without a job in today's labor market.
I would say that's not just now.
Yeah,
that this is
that's probably true. I mean, it's in the news
it's-
this week because the Fed, you know, the Fed has sort of taken a look at the first quarter of 2024. And what struck me about this is not only do you have high unemployment rates among these, for example, art history majors, 8% unemployment, performing arts majors, the best among the creative class at 5.5% unemployment, but you have astronomical levels of underemployment as well. So these people are very educated in these spaces, but maybe have a job, but not the job that they are qualified for.
Yeah. I think it's a little bit frustrating, because it's such a stereotype of kind of, I'm the art graduate and I'm now like a barista. But it makes me a little bit angry because I think society, right, like to think of art and the pursuit of art as a frivolity, and it is labor, and it is a job, and there are ways that we can encourage our artists to go and pursue their art. You know, I was doing some thinking about, you know, there's a system in France in place. If artists clock, I think it's 507 hours as a paid employee on production, they are guaranteed, you know, an income courtesy of the French government. It's not a lot of money, but it is something that is guaranteed. And in Ireland, they introduced a program that's basically providing a universal basic income for 2,000 Irish artists so that they have the money, they have those necessities, the food, the rent covered, so that they can go out and pursue what they are, qualified to do. So it's not a mystery to figure out how to create space for these artists to do what they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, there was a report earlier this year in May from Creative Rebuild New York, which is a group, right? And now this is a survey that was done, and it is self-reported. However, if you look at this, right, arts and culture sector, they figure accounts for about 7.4% of New York's economy, which is not small. However, almost 60% of people in that survey who are artists are earning less than $25,000 a year. 86% are earning less than $50,000 a year. And this is in New York.
Yes, I know this intimately because my nephew is a professional dancer living in New York. So I've listened to him experience this firsthand, and it's very tough because you want to do the work, you are lauded for the work that you do, but you can't get the money to support yourself. It's always piecing something together. So that's point one. Point two is I was impressed by Swiss Beats, and you all will know his wife, Alicia Keys, putting together two programs. One, an internship for artists who are established, and another program to assist artists as they're trying to, this is visual artists specifically. This grew out of their big exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum called Giants, but they are saying, hey, if someone plays one of our records, because he was a rapper, we get paid a gain, we get a residual. So they're trying to set up a residual program to help artists be in a space where people do regard their work as labor and understanding that it's labor.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that struck me if you go into this study, and it is bleak for art students, but there are so many majors across all sorts of genres, so to speak, where there is serious underemployment, whether that be environmental sciences, economics, criminal justice, chemistry, business management. So there's, this comes in the context of a really interesting thing where you have a lot of people who are very educated who are having a hard time finding jobs that they are that they are challenged in, and
I would say one more thing about the art history majors still underemployed. They are educated in the way that they're educated about art history. That can go in almost any corporate setting. What the skills that they bring, the portfolio skills that they bring, and that what they know, their depth of knowledge is really applicable. We have to stop thinking about art is in a box over here and does not connect with anything else in our lives and world.
Well, how would they do with the studios? Who knows? Up next, more consolidations, more problems. We look at a studio merger that has been months in the making, Paramount and Skydance. That is next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
We listen to what matters to you.
I'm reporter Craig Lamolt.
I'm reporter Marilyn Sherrod.
Do you have a tip?
Want to offer feedback?
Invite us to an event?
Or want to participate in a listening session?
Feel free to reach out to us.
Email gbhnewsconnect@wgbh.org.
GBH News Connect at wgbh.org.
We'd love to hear from you.
Making you part of our newsroom. GBH News Connect at wgbh.org.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Morningside Music Bridge, returning to Boston. The summer program shines a spotlight on young classical musicians from around the world, with concerts now through August 2nd at New England Conservatory. mmb.international.
GBH 89.7 listeners prefer to purchase from companies that sponsor GBH. Become a corporate sponsor today. Packages can include audio, video, digital, and events. Learn more at gbh.org/sponsorship.
Can an AI chatbot expand the imagination of humans? Supporters say writers could draw inspiration from AI. Critics disagree, saying it makes art less diverse. So scientists asked people to come up with stories, with and without a chatbot's help.
My heart is racing as the door opens. There, in front of us, is an alien.
The results of an AI creative writing challenge on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to the Culture Show, broadcasting live from the GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III with co-hosts Callie Crossley and James Bennett II. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes the end of the Redstone family's reign in entertainment, with Paramount merging with Skydance. But before that, we take a moment to remember actress Shelley Duvall, who died this week at the age of 75 at her home in Texas. She's most famous probably for her roles in The Shining, Nashville, and Popeye, among all kinds of other movies. Sort of, I think of her as an avatar of the naturally offbeat. Roger Ebert once said in 1980 of her that she looks and sounds like almost nobody else, which I think is about as high of a compliment as you can have as a human. What do you take away from her legacy, Callie?
Well, I thought she was fantastic as Olive Oyl in Popeye.
The much maligned Popeye.
I love that, but she was great. I love that. And I also enjoyed her in Nashville. But I have to say, when I stumbled across her fairy tale theater, I don't know if you all ever saw that, but she just sort of reinvented all of the classic fairy tales, and with her, I'm not going to use the word quirky, but with her distinctive style of presentation, it really brought those fairy tales to life.
Yeah, I was actually going to make that point, right? Because it's, for better or for worse, Shelley Duvall is so associated with The Shining, which she had a miserable time filming.
Let's hear a little of The Shining with Shelley Duvall, probably her most famous role.
Yeah. I just want to go back to my room.
Why?
I'm very confused. I just need a chance to think things over. So April, just don't hurt me.
I'm not gonna hurt you. Stop swinging the bat.
Damn it!
Put the bat down, Wendy.
Damn it!
Wendy! Give me the bat. Give me the bat.
And that is iconic, but her mind was just so imaginative. And with respect to fairy tale theater, she had that idea when she was shooting Popeye.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there was a really good obituary in New York Magazine, and it pointed out that during breaks between shooting scenes, she was reading an illustrated edition of The Frog Prince, and she was like, I want to make this, and networks were turning down the idea because it was too quirky for them to handle. But that show was stacked. Ben Vereen, Christopher Lee, Eric Idle was the host. Francis Ford Coppola directed. Everyone just wanted to be a part of this, it seemed.
Yeah, and I mean, that sort of speaks to she was able to draw from all of that talent because people really liked working with her. Okay, so another merger here in the ever-consolidating world of movie studios. This one is Skydance Media and Paramount in an $8 billion deal. Just to kind of go over this, Skydance Media is essentially a production house. They've been behind really huge movies like Top Gun, Star Trek, Transformers, Mission Impossible. And then you have Paramount, which of course is Paramount, which includes Paramount Pictures, CBS, MTV, VH1, BET, Nickelodeon, Comedy Central, of course Paramount Plus, and you can't sleep on Pluto TV, another one of those free streaming services out there. Huge deal, but what does it mean?
What it means is that money talks, and you know what else walks.
Yeah.
David Ellison is the founder of Skydance and the son of billionaire Larry Ellison, who is the founder of the software company Oracle. So if you have plenty of bucks, then you too can own an iconic studio. Now the question is, how will he direct it? I really didn't pay attention to Skydance except with Mission Impossible. So clearly they had plenty of money to fund these over-the-top movies that cost a lot of money and made a lot of money. And to some degree, that was risk-taking with Tom. So maybe there'll be some interesting projects that we think not of at this moment.
There are so many thoughts swirling around, and I'm trying to just grab them all and just kind of put them into one thing, because this is a frustrating thing to think about, at least for me.
Why?
Because Paramount's been in the news because they do not know what they're doing. They are floundering.
I mean, Paramount Plus is losing multi-million every quarter.
And
remember, this is a family business before. Go ahead, the Redstones.
But it's that plusification, right? Like Paramount Plus, like why does no one want to get Paramount Plus? And it's because it's like, it's not HBO. You know, it's not Disney. It's not Netflix, right? We can say, yo, I love this new HBO show, House of the Dragon on HBO. I love Finding Nemo. I love Inside Out from Pixar. Like if you went onto the street right now and like, yo, name a Paramount movie, people could probably do it. But no one's thinking of Top Gun as like, oh, I love that Paramount movie, Top Gun. You know, it's almost like the brand has been synonymous with failure in the past couple of years, which is a very odd thing because there's such, you know, a powerhouse. Even you just said, you know, Callie, about Skydance being behind, you know, Top Gun Maverick. No one thinks about that as a Skydance movie. And so I'm really curious to see how they pivot the branding of the studios and the marketing behind the content that they push out.
The thing that has really caught my eye about this deal, so the new CEO or the head of the new Paramount is going to be David Ellison, who is the son of Oracle founder Larry Ellison. Now, there's already been sort of rumblings or talks about partnerships with Oracle in this, and one of the sort of themes in the things that Ellison has been saying in recent days revolve around this idea of technology being embraced. And so, you know, we've talked a lot about the AIification and what AI is going to mean for the future of Hollywood. And I think this looks like a studio that is going to embrace it. You know,
absolutely.
There's a quote here. Yeah. They want to transition to a world-class media and technology enterprise.
Right.
So I think that's the thing I'm going to be watching.
And it's like, it just feels to me they're trying so hard to make something work. So the chair of Paramount Global actually had this quote where she said that they want to fortify Paramount while ensuring that content remains king. Movies are fundamentally art. You were talking about art being labor, you know, earlier in the show. Thinking about that as content just runs to me so counter to what, you know, is good. Can you have good content? Sure. But it's just this vision of looking at it as the money maker, which everyone does, and that's fine. But it's, I don't know, I hate that word content, and it's so upsetting to me, I guess, that this merger's been announced and that word is at the fore, you know.
I understand what you're saying,
that's all.
But if we took one optimistic view of it, that probably won't happen. Let's assume they're going to go full on with the tech piece of it. What if they put the emphasis on the distribution and not so much messing around with the people who actually make what is now being described as content?
That's fine.
Because they now have the money to do it.
Get Callie Crossley on the board.
That's it.
Get Callie Crossley on the board.
Well, I'm saying that because
the new Paramount.
If we look at Tom's movies, Mission Impossible, they could have AI'd a lot of that. That's real. You know, they pay money for that. Now, again, he's invested his own time and money into it, but they could have gone that way. They chose not to. They went with his vision of it. So there's a possibility they could go with the vision on smaller projects because they have the breadth to do it. They're making money up here. With Tom, they don't need, you know, they can make 15 more Thelmas, for example.
Okay. Speaking of investing your own money in movies, what is not on the horizon? Any more Horizon from Kevin Costner. So if you haven't been following, Kevin Costner has directed, starred in, co-wrote, partially financed what he hoped was going to be a 4-film epic about the sort of the American West from pre-Civil War through post-Civil War. First movie came out, it cost about $100 million to make. It made $22.6 million, so it did not do very well.
By the way.
Worldwide. Did not do very well. And the second chapter was due to be released very shortly after the first. The whole idea was it was going to be 6 weeks, and then bam, movie 2 comes out. It has now been decided they're not even putting it in theaters. What do we make of it?
We make that he lost $30 million. That's what we make. Now, here's a situation where you do have an artist at the center of this, and perhaps he needed to have some other vision about what he was doing, because the reviews that I've read say that it felt like a run-up to the beginning of the story. They felt like the prologue, that he was so busy introducing all the characters, there was no story. And so people were like, well, why would I pay $6 or whatever it is now to see a movie that is just giving me the prologue of the actual movie, which you say is coming in August?
Yeah. You said it feels like a prologue and it's a run-up. And I'm like, well, at first I was like, that's what TV is for. That's what your pilot is for. But, you know, the grand irony of all this, too, is that this is on the heels of Costner leaving Yellowstone, now streaming on Paramount Plus.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice callback,
which was well
James.
written.
But, Kevin Costner as an artist, it's interesting to think about because there was some quote that I read from him where effectively, like, he doesn't care. He's really excited about this movie. He's like, I want people to see it because this is what I want. And he's like, it's a good box office, great, fine. But, like, that's not, for me, Kevin, the point.
Let's hear a little from Kevin on the New Yorker Radio Hour with David Remnick, and he's talking about why he gambled on this project.
Will I claw my money back? The hope is that I will. Will I make a lot of money? Anybody listening? Yeah, I hope so. Hope I'll make a boatload. But I'm not gonna not do what I have a chance to do. I don't think I would feel very good about myself. I have a relationship with an audience, and it is when they go to dark and they see a movie I want them at the end to understand, wow, I think I understood why I made that movie. I was really entertained by it.
I think...
Except they weren't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing I will say is this. Here we talk a lot about the hand-wringing around the future of movies. I know we are all fans of the cinema. We all like to go to the movie theater. And, I do give him kudos for sort of putting his money where his mouth is and trying something big in the movies, right? He easily could have done this as a streaming television show, but he had this notion. It hasn't worked, obviously. We're going to put one movie out, and then 6 weeks later we'll put another out. You could see in his mind him going, we're going to kind of take the streaming thing, but we're going to do it in the theaters. It doesn't look like it worked out, but he took a swing, and good for him.
And it's just like, I just want to quickly say, this comes back to the studio idea.
Mm-hmm.
What I think it's New Line. What they want to do, they're like, we need to give audiences more time to see, Horizon Part 1, which means are they going to put that back in theaters? I don't know. They should. It's coming to HBO, I think, later on this month if it's not there already.
I think they should stream it.
Right, but it does come back to this idea of like, okay, studio, you have the money, don't touch the art, figure something out. If your priority is to get people to see it, get it in front of eyes.
All right, so speaking of things that get people to the theaters, last year it was Barbenheimer. This year, could it be Glicked? Yes, that is a combination of Gladiator 2 and Wicked. Now, we sort of have a notion of how this might work. Let's have a listen to how the mashup of these two films might be experienced.
Are people born wicked? Or do they have wickedness thrust upon them? You're green. I am.
I remember that day. I never forgot it. That a slave could take revenge against an emperor.
The greatest temple Rome ever built. The Colosseum. Because this is what they believe in. Power.
It's going to be bloody. No. I will be all up in Wicked for sure.
But the idea of combining these together is not going to move you to go
no,
see
because
both
I know
movies.
it's going to be so violent, and I don't like violence.
Okay, fair enough. What do you think? I mean, this is
Denzel.
To
He's
me,
in
this
it.
is in the category of like every ceiling is a floor, right?
Yeah.
There was such an astounding sort of success in this this kind of like idiosyncratic combination of movies, and they're trying to spin it out again, but I don't know.
I think they could work, though. I'm just saying I won't go to both of them, but I think it would work.
I don't think it'll work.
Really?
No.
Why?
No, not this phenomenon that was Barbenheimer being replicated again. We were just listening to Kevin Costner talk about taking that gamble, on the box office. I'm taking the hard under on box office revenue combined for these two movies to come even close to what Barbenheimer was. There's a huge difference. One was that the movie Barbie, right? There was such a it became real life.
That's
it was
true.
everywhere. And also Barbenheimer was funny. Like they were both really good movies, but we went for the bit, and the bit is absent with this. Also, just real talk, Gerwig and Christopher Nolan, when they were doing their thing last summer, those are two actors that have their people expect a level of quality that, just to be real, like Ridley Scott has not really been writing on. I mean, Napoleon wasn't a bad movie. It was definitely a weird movie. And John Chu, who is doing Wicked, he has Crazy Rich Asians, which was great, and In the Heights, which was, fun. But it's not, to me, those two men together aren't really coming close to the geekery of, Gerwig and Nolan combined. Also, this is the winter. It's November. It's a lot different doing the bit when it's cold in Oscar season, as they call it, versus going out in the park and, having fun with these two wildly juxtaposed movies.
Well, let me just add something that you said that maybe we're okay, because people know Wicked from the theater. So if you don't have that base, like you already had for Barbie, to James's point, that might be a problem.
Really quick before we go to break, just want to note, you just talked about having an over or an under. This week, going on auction, expected to come up with $30,000 is the opening bid for Carrie Fisher's golden bikini from Return of the Jedi. Do you think this is going to sell for more or less than its opening bid?
Way more.
Way more.
It's iconic, right?
Yes.
Even though Carrie Fisher, on the record, as really hating the experience of being in it and saying that she loved the fact that for all of that angst she was feeling while she was in that bikini, she got to kill Jabba the Hutt at the end of that scene.
But also quickly, in her memoir, she also noted that her favorite Star Wars artifact is that bikini, seeing that at, part of cosplay and at conventions. So,
The complexity of the human condition. All right, we're stepping away for just a moment. Coming up, it's Follow-Up Friday, where we bring you up to speed on all the stories we've been tracking here on The Culture Show. That's next. Stay with us.
Everyday people.
I remember feeling nervous as I faced my very first shift at my very first job.
Personal stories.
I had no idea how to serve ice cream. One of my first customers was this surfer dude. He came in and he asked for something that he hadn't prepared me for. All the money in the cash register.
Stories from the stage. Sunday night at 7 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Hebrew Senior Life, a Harvard Medical School affiliate empowering seniors to reach their full potential through senior living, healthcare, aging research, and more. You can consider Hebrew Senior Life at allweareforyou.org. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com.
When a city is picked to host the Olympic Games, there's usually a promise about new building projects and lots of jobs to support the local economy. But things don't often work out that way.
You can make other choices about bringing economic opportunity. You don't have to host the Olympics to do that.
Broken Olympic Promises, that's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to The Culture Show, broadcasting live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. If you are just tuning in, it is our Arts and Culture Weekend Review, and it is Friday, which on The Culture Show can only mean one thing.
It's time for Follow-Up Friday. Follow-Up Friday. Follow-Up Friday.
Yes, it is time for Follow-Up Friday with the latest developments on some of the ongoing stories we've been covering. And that includes Alec Baldwin's manslaughter trial. There's some news here coming out of the courtroom just not too long ago. Apparently, the trial has been put on pause momentarily.
Wow.
It took a dramatic turn. A manila envelope with previously unexamined evidence was brought into the courtroom. The judge apparently put on blue latex gloves, came down, he got some scissors, opened up the envelope, took a look at it. There was some sort of ammunition in it. The lawyers for Mr. Baldwin have said, you need to dismiss this. They've been hiding evidence, so it's on pause right now. Dramatic turn in a celebrity trial. Who saw that coming?
Nobody saw that coming. I will say he's up for involuntary manslaughter charges. He got a win from the judge by just having to face charges with regard to his role as an actor, not as a producer on the film, which makes very narrow focus about what he can be charged with in the end. And I'm just going to say that when all this is said and done, the horribleness of this, the accident, the loss of life, and the injuries comes down to they didn't pay enough for the experts that needed to be dealing with this equipment, and they were short-staffed, period. I think that's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, as a reminder, if you haven't been following, this is the 2021 on-set shooting death of Helena Hutchins, who was the cinematographer on this movie, Rust. Alec Baldwin was holding a gun in his hand when it happened. One of the things I guess this trial is turning on is whether or not he pulled the trigger or not, or if it just went off. The armorer, who's the person responsible for weapons or false weapons on a film set, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, was convicted already of involuntary manslaughter. She is serving an 18-month sentence right now, and now the attention turns to Alec Baldwin.
And she was supposed to testify in this trial, by the way.
And I think she still will, but it's been pushed off for now.
I know you just mentioned, right, that the judge, ruled that, not ruled, but, declared that Baldwin's involvement as a producer isn't relevant. Mm-hmm. And I just want to take a minute to just think that maybe it is, or it could be. There's a lot of, things that go into, obviously, making a movie. We've been talking a lot about labor today. And, it's the especially as an executive producer, it's the job to kind of make the job safe and desirable, right? Mm-hmm. Sure, we can talk about the armor and the responsibility of the armor to make sure everything is together, but if I remember correctly, the crew of that movie, they were being worked into the ground.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Imagine, you're tired, you're driving, long ways to set, back to, hotel. Things might slip through the cracks if you weren't on your A game. And, you can say, if this was any other thing, even if this were work back at the office, right, you might have to look at, well, what's management doing? How are they facilitating this unpleasant working experience? So I just want to put that out there.
No, I agree with it, but that's why everybody says it was a win for him, because the judge said otherwise. And the other question is, why was there ever a live ammunition on the set?
Well,
period?
that also, perhaps this new evidence is going to shine some light on that.
Yeah.
That remains to be seen. Now, the last time the three of us gathered here at the Boston Public Library was just before the 4th of July.
Yes.
Now, that is that you could look at that as Independence Day, but it is also essentially the weekend of the day of the Super Bowl of Major League Eating, which is the Nathan's Hot Dog Contest, which is now this week become befallen with scandal.
Yes. Because the guy who won, well, first of all, Joey, who was a longtime winner,
that's right. Joey
out.
Chestnut was not allowed in it in the first place
because he signed a deal with a vegan hot dog
He turned
company,
his back on meat.
And Nathan said, we don't think so. So he's out. So now a new guy has an opportunity to rise to the top. He did. And now they're saying he cheated. The way they count the hot dogs is they put a number on plates, and you go through however many on the plate and then the next one. They think that he did some sleight of hand and pulled somebody's plate over here and somebody's plate over there.
I don't think it was the winner, though. Yeah. I think it was somebody who's a little bit further down in the standings.
Okay, all right.
He was is this where I'm?
He was fourth.
He was fourth. Was he fourth place before or after that recount?
It sounds like whether you do the recount or not, he's still going to be in fourth place. So it shouldn't affect the standings. But is the integrity of the game at stake here,
James?
The
integrity
of Major League Eating? Yes. I mean, it's a serious sport, Kelly. These people train.
Kelly, I'm glad you explained how scoring works with the counting of the plates, because to me, the big story out of this is that it is possible to cheat in an eating competition. I was reading that story and I was just scrolling to figure out how did he did he do it? Did he weigh himself after he drink a bunch of water and then what? So that to me is.
I mean, Wimbledon's going on. I look at they have got computers that can take a look at whether a ball was in or out down to the micrometer, and meanwhile, Major League Eating is still having some guy amble up and go, "Let me see how many plates you have here." That's a lot of hot dogs. Yeah. What are they doing?
And
this is their biggest event of the year. Come on now.
Oh boy, I tell you.
Okay, so one thing that it sounds like might help them is to employ AI somehow to count these hot dogs. But AI AI specifically as it relates to celebrity voices is something that we've talked about here. We are keeping a very close eye on. And this week, a really interesting deal has taken place in terms of where we might be hearing certain celebrity voices. Callie, why don't you tell us about what happened?
So this company called 11 Labs has made agreements with the estates of people like Judy Garland, James Dean, and Burt Reynolds to use their voices and I guess articles, PDF, newsletter, whatever, turn it all into all the stuff that they did before and turn it into voiceovers. We don't know yet what kind of voiceover, and that is where people are getting a little nervous. Yes, the estates agreed to it, and why did they agree to it? Money, 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 money. So that's what that's about. But at a time where actors are, trying so hard to make sure that they're authentic voices, like Scarlett Johansson just recently filed a lawsuit against a company that asked her to use her voice. She said no, and then they created something that sounded awfully close. So she's suing them. So it's just an interesting deal. I will point out that I've been wondering since before AI became a big topic, how the Jimmy Dean commercials for sausage.
The Jimmy Dean sausage?
Yeah, because there's, there he is saying, and I think you want to have sausage. But that man's been dead forever.
Jimmy Dean sausage.
He's been dead forever.
Well, it's probably just a recording of it. I'm sure he recorded that.
I don't know that he recorded exactly that.
It's a good question. We don't know if it's AI or not. And what's interesting, one of the things, 11 Labs had previously made headlines this year because that is the company that was reportedly used to create a fake robocall from Joe Biden.
That's right. I forgot.
So what's interesting is they've gone out of their way in this case to say, no, this project is on the up and up. We have talked to the estates, and they are in on this.
Yeah.
I want us to all take a moment listening now to think about the executives that are in charge of this decision. Like you said, Callie, they're doing this because of the money.
Right.
I'll be real. They're using these voices, Burt Reynolds and Judy Garland, right, as to be the voices of an e-reader. So you pull up the text, and then you hear the voice from Cannonball Run or White Lightning, reading it back to you, which is a very bizarre thing to me. I don't use those text-to-speech listening things because it doesn't sound human. It doesn't sound natural. But I also don't necessarily need, the ghost of a, deceased actor, doing this either. But for me, it's like, this is an opportunity to give somebody a job. That you can use a real human to, record, this text, even if it's a news article or something, and have it read back to you. Then I would use it, and then that would make, them money. I suppose I can't be the only one that's like very against that text to speech because it just sounds so artificial. I promise you, if there was a human reading it, I would be so much more into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one voice that I think we can all agree is real is the voice of Shabuzi, who has staked his claim to the song of the summer. Let's hear a little of a bar song, parentheses, Tipsy. James, tell us about this song.
So it debuted back in April, rose to the top of the Hot Country Billboard chart, and now it's back again at the top 100 of the Billboard regular chart. It has transcended genre, as they say, even though it is definitively a country song. I love how simple it is. It's like every stereotype of a country song that we joke about.
It is right down the middle pop country song.
My girlfriend wants fashion designer, like bags and clothes. Groceries are expensive. I have to pay for gas to get to this job that I hate. It's a 9 to 5. I want to go to the bar and get a double shot of Jack. We got to hit. It's just like, it's so, I don't know, like it's so listenable because it's not funny, but it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I want to make a point, too, that, Shabuzi, I'm not sure if he was born there, but he is of Nigerian descent.
Yeah.
And so it does bring into play this conversation about, like, what the idea of country music is, this slice of, American, culture, right?
Yeah.
Like, in that fabric. How do you replicate, not replicate, but how do you participate in it? And it's like, I don't know, it's a really fascinating thing to think about.
I think he comes by it honestly in so much as he was raised in Northern Virginia, where, one of the sort of spaces where we think of country music as being very listened to. Now, we talk about this in Follow Up Friday, in part because when Beyonce released her country album, we all sort of said, how big is the ground shift going to be? And I think this is clearly got to be seen in the wake of that.
Well, not only in the wake of that, she featured him on 2 songs songs on Cowboy Carter. And she said explicitly, I intend to give a boost to a lot of people. And that's what did it for him. He's been around for a while. He first gained attention with a song called Start a Riot, which was featured in Spider-Man.
Spider-Verse,
going into the Spider-Verse, the animated feature. And so people have recognized his talent, but again, trying to fit himself into this genre. When Bey came out with the album and it blew up, there he was, 2 songs, and now he's going up. I just want to point out something. Quiet luxury, as you know, is a trend in this country. And in this very country song, we starts it with talking about my baby want a Birkin. We said, well, since when would that be in a country song? Do people know a Birkin is a very
genres change? This is all about change.
Okay.
We're casting a wider net.
All right.
Town
I'm just
Road,
asking the
Lil
question.
Nas X is rapping about about Fendi and Gucci too.
Well, yeah, I got that, but a lot of rappers are doing that. But in a country song that is supposed to be typically country, you start with a Birkin.
So I was thinking about this, right?
Okay.
About this idea of what country music, means, the associations that we make with it, the stereotypes that exist, the pickup truck, the bad job, like the thing that that rough life that you're living. Those country artists make a lot of money.
Well,
and I bet they have that birth, so it almost feels like a weird slice of authenticity to kind of bring it.
All right, well, so far this seems to be the candidate for the Song of the Summer, but how about a song of a generation of summers? Callie Crossley has brought something very important to our attention this week. Let's put some burgers on the grill and hear a little Frankie Beverly. Get up. Unless you're in your car out there, don't stand up if you're in your car.
But you can pull over.
But yes, you can.
And
Here we go. Not a lot of people standing up in the library.
But we are.
But Callie's up. Callie's up. All right, Callie.
This is the Electric Slide anthem of Bless America. As Wesley Morris, who used to be a cultural critic here for the Boston Globe and is now at the New York Times, Pulitzer Prize winning, Wesley Morris said, if you want to know who is black in any town, just go stand out on the street and press the button and play the song, and black people will come running. It is known as the cookout song. It's the anthem for weddings, sometimes funerals, always the cookout, which is a difference between the cookout and the barbecue in the black community. The cookout is hot dogs and hamburgers. The barbecue, I needn't say more, is a certain kind of methodology of which I am expert. But at this moment, Frankie Beverly, the reason we're talking about it, is retired. And this is like a huge deal. He's been speaking and singing at the Essence Festival for 30 years, as long as the festival's been there. They gave him a big tribute to say goodbye. The group will continue with, a substitute like they do with the Temptations and some of those other iconic groups. But this song, Before I Let Go, which is actually a breakup song, as he pointed out, it just exists everywhere, and it's cross-generational.
Remember, it's not you make me happy.
Right.
It's you made me happy.
That's right.
To your point, though, about kind of like the magnetic pull, I just want to say I got to the office early yesterday.
Oh, no, finish your story.
Okay.
That's the lightning round, but quick.
I got to the office early yesterday. I didn't know Callie was there. I just heard it blasting, out of a door, and I just shuffled I looked aside my way into the office. No one was there, I thought, but you were there to greet me, Callie.
There I was. And you said, where's the cookout?
I did say that.
There it is. Okay, it is now, as you just heard, time. Oh, it is definitely time for the lightning round. This is where we talk about the stories that caught our eye this week in lightning fashion. Callie, what do you got?
They are doing a sequel to Devil Wears Prada, which I can't wait for. Yes, I would love to see Meryl Streep in it. We don't know if that's happening, but in the sequel, the assistant Emily Blunt played will now be rich and famous, and the publishing company will be in the toilet, and so Miranda Priestley has to go to her.
The turns have tabled.
Right,
I see what they did there.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'm looking forward to it.
James, what struck you this week?
All right, so I was thinking about our Hooper-in-Chief, former president, Barack Obama.
Yes. It's pretty good Obama. That's a serviceable Obama.
He pulled up to Vegas earlier this week to, send off the U.S. Men's basketball team on their way to Paris to the Olympics, which is going to be a fantastic tournament, by the way. And in a case, as you pointed out, Kelly, of life really imitating art, he did to a T, almost a reenactment of that very viral Key and Peele skit, the Black Meet and Greet, where President Obama gets off the podium and he's like just dapping up, all the black folk and all the non-black people. You get a firm handshake. How are you doing? And so he comes out, daps up, Curry just pulls the broad in for a hug, joking around with Ant-Man, and then gets to like Steve Kerr. Hi, how you doing? And then turns on a dime. I'm the Hooper in chief. Let's send these boys to Paris.
So interestingly, James, the story that caught my eye is also an example of life imitating art. And this is 30 years ago almost now on The Simpsons. There was a joke in an episode where Homer goes and is part of Lollapalooza, right? And a guy comes in and he says, "Who ordered the London Symphony Orchestra? Anybody?" "Why, possibly While High, Cypress Hill, I'm looking in your direction." Cypress Hill, a hip-hop group famous for loving smoking weed. And it was a bit on The Simpsons. Well, this week, Cypress Hill played the Royal Albert Hall with the London Symphony Orchestra. It actually came true. So kudos to everybody involved in that. And that is it for us here with The Culture Show. You can catch up on all things arts and culture by way of our podcasts, which you can find on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to the Culture Show crew for making this happen for us today and this week. That's Kate Dellis, Molly McCall, Max Chow-Gillette, Brian Bell, and Chelsea Mers. Our thanks to the BPL technical and logistics crew: Glenn Heath, Sai Patel, Josh Polonsky, Maddie Geyer, Matthew Glover, Eddie Hickey, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena Dueñas, and thanks to City Table, the Lennox Hotel, and the Newsfeed Cafe. Now get up, do the electro slide with Callie Crossley. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Have a great weekend.
Where is Mary? Where is she? Where is she? She's just about to close up the library.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
All things